So how does a mild-mannered professor go from teaching a bunch of misfits in an abandoned house
The Royal Mint of Spain.
to pulling off the greatest heist in history, stealing 2.4 billion euros?
How does stealing 2.4 billion euros sound to you?
Stick around, because today we're covering the entire story of Money Heist. This Spanish show came out of nowhere in 2017 and took over the entire planet. I'm talking about one of the most watched non-English series on Netflix, period. And remember that one Halloween where literally everybody showed up in red jumpsuits and Dali masks? Yeah, you just couldn't escape it. So, let's get into it. Episode 1 opens with a girl we'll come to know as Tokyo running for her life, and she's not having a very good time doing it. The love of her life just got killed during their 16th robbery together. They could have just called it quits after 15, but they didn't, and the 16th was a doozy. A security guard shot Tokyo's boyfriend, and Tokyo shot back. Now she's a murderer who's gonna face 30 years in prison. Tokyo's been on the run for 11 days. Her face is plastered in every police station across Spain. Now, Tokyo decides to see her mother one last time, but here's the thing. The police are already waiting at her mom's house ready to grab Tokyo the second she shows up. That's when this random guy in a beat-up 1992 Seat Ibiza rolls up. She pulls a gun on him because, stranger danger, but this guy is just about to save her life. This guy knows about the trap, and is giving Tokyo an offer. One job, 2.4 billion euros. The biggest heist ever attempted, making even Ocean's 11 look like amateur hour. When the alternative is 30 years in prison, that's a pretty good deal. So yeah, Tokyo accepts and gets driven to a mansion in Toledo, where she meets the rest of the crew. The head guy introduces himself as the professor, the mastermind behind everything. The professor announces they'll be spending 5 months preparing for the heist. His logic: people spend years studying for regular salaries, so 5 months to never work again is actually a steal. But for anything to be successful, there has to be rules. And the rules here are simple. No real names, no personal details, and no relationships. And most importantly, nobody should be killed, not even the police. Next, everybody picks a city as their code name. We've got Berlin, a slick jewelry thief who clearly thinks that he's in charge. Rio, the computer geek who's way too young to be there. Nairobi, a master counterfeiter who knows her way around fake bills. And then there's Denver and his dad Moscow, the team's mechanics. Finally, Helsinki and Oslo, two Serbian enforcers who don't say much but definitely look like they can handle themselves. The target: Fábrica Nacional de Moneda y Timbre, also known as the Royal Mint of Spain. The plan is to break in, take control, and make it look like they got caught trying to escape. But here's the problem. 5 months of training is apparently enough time for Rio and Tokyo to forget one of their professor's rules. The one about personal relationships. They've been sticking around, and Rio has caught feelings pretty hard. But it might just cost them the whole operation. On the big day, everything goes according to plan. They rob the mint, and the cops show up just as planned, but things go sideways actually really fast. The professor got everything right, but he forgot one thing. The police would actually shoot back at them. So that rule about not killing anybody got tossed out the window pretty fast. Tokyo watches Rio drop, and something in her just snaps. She fires back. Suddenly the whole operation goes completely sideways. 2 officers are down, and what was supposed to be a controlled heist is now an absolute disaster. Episode 2 kicks off 8 hours into the heist, and the professor is not very happy. 2 cops just got shot, and that was not part of the plan. The professor is on the phone demanding answers, but Tokyo insists that she only fired because the officers shot at them first. She conveniently leaves out the part where her feelings for Rio might have influenced her decision. Oh, and Rio actually survived, by the way, but whether or not that's for the best remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Inspector Raquel is enjoying her day off when she gets the call that nobody wants. There's a hostage situation at the Royal Mint, and she's the negotiator. Raquel arrives to find 67 hostages trapped inside, including 17 British schoolchildren who were just visiting the place. And wow, I thought I had some bad field trips. The robbers have cut all signals, so hacking into cameras or communications is just not happening. Inside the Mint, Berlin's running the show. He's got 7 robbers armed with M16 rifles backing him up. The special ops team arrives ready to storm the building, led by Suarez. There's also Colonel Prieto from Spanish intelligence, who's not a fan of Raquel's negotiation approach. He just wants to go in guns blazing, but that's exactly where the professor's genius kicks in. He predicted Prieto's move during their preparation, so as the police prepare their assault, one of the hostages, named Alison Parker, who just happens to be the UK ambassador's daughter, gets put on a call to a radio station by the robbers and broadcasts live from inside. Alison reveals something crazy. Every single hostage has been dressed in identical red jumpsuits and Dali masks, and they've all been given fake guns. Damn. Professor really thought this out, didn't he? So obviously the police freeze. I mean, how do you storm a building when you can't tell who's a criminal and who's a terrified teenager? The assault gets aborted seconds just before entry. While this chaos unfolds outside, the team's got the Mint employees working the printing machines. This is where the actual plan gets revealed. They're not stealing money that's already there. They're printing brand new notes themselves. Nairobi orders the machines to run 24/7, and their target is 2.4 billion euros, maybe more.
Every time we stop, we forfeit $500,000, so we're not stopping.
It all depends on how long they can stay inside without the police figuring out what's actually happening. Outside the Mint, Inspector Raquel steps into Cafe Hanoi to make a phone call to her boss, but her phone's battery's dead. A mysterious man sitting nearby offers to let her use his charger, but Raquel has no idea she's sitting across from the professor himself, the guy who's been orchestrating everything from his hideout. So while the police think they're dealing with a botched robbery, the professor's plan is actually working perfectly. Episode 3 picks up right where we left off, with Inspector Raquel at the cafe leaving a voicemail for her boss. She's resigning because she refuses to be a puppet while intelligence bulldozes into the situation. Meanwhile, 20 hours into the robbery, things are looking pretty smooth. The gang's already printed 52 million euros, and the professor is watching everything through cameras in the Mint. Later, the robbers send out a hostage, Monica, to deliver a message. Monica tells police all 67 hostages are healthy and reminds them that everybody inside is dressed in red jumpsuits. Police snipers have clear shots, but the Deputy Inspector Angel, Raquel's partner, orders them to stand down. Can't risk shooting the wrong person, you know. The robbers negotiate for supplies to be delivered to the Mint, getting the hostages what they need. But then Monica requests an abortion pill. It's pretty random, isn't it? Apparently, she's pregnant with the baby of Arturo Ramon, the Mint director. Yes, a classic workplace romance, except this guy is married, which complicates things. Meanwhile, Rio's been ordered to take Allison to a separate room, and Tokyo joins them. Rio and Tokyo get into an argument about their relationship drama, and while they're distracted, Allison manages to grab her phone and turn it on. The cops outside immediately hack into the camera. Rio catches Allison and smashes her phone on the ground, but it's too late. The police already captured footage with his face clearly visible. Inspector Raquel gets called back to the office after her boss manages to calm her down and convince her to stay. Meanwhile, inside the Mint, Berlin recruits Arturo and another hostage to dig a tunnel into the basement of the building. Nobody knows why they're digging, but it's clearly part of the plan. Back to Monica, she wants to take care of her little baby problem, but Denver thinks that that's a bad idea. He hands Monica some cash and tells Monica to reconsider, so she decides to keep thinking about it. Berlin walks in, and that's when a phone rings in Monica's pocket. Naturally, Berlin is furious. They've already seized everything from the hostages. He searches Monica and finds not just the phone, but also Denver's cash. To punish this massive breach, he orders Denver to kill Monica. Crazy, I know. But that's not all. The real problem hits when the professor calls with some grave news. Tokyo and Rio's relationship has compromised everything. The police analyzed the video from the phone, and they identified Rio and linked him to Tokyo from when they visited the museum for recon. Their faces are now plastered on every news program across Spain. Episode 4 opens 26 hours into the heist, and Denver has got a problem. Remember Monica, the hostage he was supposed to kill? Yeah, turns out killing people is not as easy as Berlin makes it sound. Denver couldn't do it. Monica pitches Denver a crazy survival plan. She tells Denver to shoot her in the thigh, make it look real, and she'll hide in a vault where only she has access. And Denver actually goes through with it. The hostages hear those gunshots from Monica's execution and start panicking. Moscow takes it the hardest when he learns his son supposedly killed somebody. The realization hits Moscow so hard that he has a full-on panic attack right there on the factory floor. He can't breathe. He's clutching his chest. He's convinced that he's having a heart attack. He's realizing what he's done to his son. He brought Denver into this nightmare. Denver owed money to a drug dealer, and Moscow brought him in on the team so Denver could pay off his debt. But now Denver has killed somebody, and Moscow's collapsing under the weight of that guilt. Outside, Inspector Raquel is dealing with her own crisis. Her mom, who has dementia, lost Raquel's daughter, Paula. Turns out her ex-husband, Alberto, who she has a restraining order against, decided today was a great day to take her daughter out. Needing to decompress from her disaster of a day, Raquel meets up with the professor, who goes by the name Salva, at the coffee shop. She opens up about her ex-husband, revealing years of abuse that she couldn't report because the ex was a cop, beloved by everybody at the station. It's heavy stuff, and suddenly this whole heist situation feels like the least of our problems. Later in the episode, Denver takes Moscow and some hostages to the roof for some fresh air and to calm his dad down. Remember, everybody's in matching red jumpsuits, so it's impossible for police to tell who is who. While they're up there, Arturo overhears Denver telling Moscow about Monica. He immediately thinks that it's his baby mama Monica who was shot, so he goes rogue, pointing a gun at Denver and Moscow. The police see this. They assume that he's the robber. Raquel gives the order, and Arturo takes a bullet to the shoulder. Yeesh. They really just shot one of the hostages they were trying to save.
Arturo Roman, hold your fire!
Sniper 3, hold your fire.
Episode 5 is complete chaos. Arturo's bleeding out fast, the robbers are freaking out, and suddenly the crew's basic first aid training is about to get a real-world test. Apparently, the professor had them doing anatomy lessons with markers on each other's bodies. During these practice sessions, Tokyo noticed Nairobi has a C-section scar. Nobody knows anything about anybody in this crew. Turns out Nairobi has a whole secret past involving a child named Axel. Back in the present, Monica's still hiding out in the vault with a bullet still inside her. Denver and Moscow are freaking out about it. Moscow's particularly pissed, asking Denver why the hell he had to be the one to pull the trigger when Berlin wanted her dead. Moscow's point is actually pretty solid. They came to rob a building, not to play hero and definitely not to kill people. Now they're stuck trying to keep Monica alive without any medical help. If they fail, Denver's the one with blood on his hands. The crew can't handle Arturo's bleeding on their own. They need actual doctors. so the police send in a medical team. But here's the thing, the professor predicted this exact scenario. He literally warned them during training that the police would try to sneak somebody in, like a Trojan horse. Sure enough, one of the nurses is an undercover cop. Remember Angel? Yeah, it's him. But that's not all. 2 other agents are crawling through some vents in the Mint dressed as hostages. They're gonna infiltrate the Mint, and the professor has no idea. Meanwhile, Arturo gets a phone call with his wife Laura. He pours his heart out, but then he accidentally calls her Monica. Ooh, jeez, dude. Anyway, Berlin gets tipped off about Angel, and the crew springs into action with their own plan. Berlin tells the medics to lie on the ground like cockroaches as they search them. Then they take Angel's glasses and insert a tiny microphone inside of it. The police think that they're winning this round, but the robbers are about to turn their Trojan horse right back on them. Episode 6 starts with Moscow and Denver scrambling. Monica's bleeding out in the vault, and they need a scalpel to operate. Berlin has the surgical kit, so Denver is sent to steal tools from the surgeons who are about to operate on Arturo. Monica also gives Denver a love note to pass to Arturo. Meanwhile, Rio is watching Allison Parker. She's chatting about her father's hunting expeditions and telling stories about guns. Rio shows her his weapon isn't loaded to put her at ease, but the second he turns around, Allison grabs it and points it right at him.
There's a bullet in the chamber.
Turns out the ambassador's daughter actually knows how to handle firearms. Back in the operating room, Arturo's surgery begins. The police have exactly 25 minutes for their infiltration plan to work. 2 officers are crawling through air ducts wearing Dali masks to blend in once they get inside. During the surgery, Denver manages to snatch a scalpel, but here's the problem. He accidentally drops Monica's love note.
The love note that Monica had thrown to the sea was lost. Well, almost.
Nairobi, who notices everything, picks it up. Instead of ratting Denver out, she quietly follows him to the vault where Moscow is trying to save Monica. She helps them remove the bullet and keep Monica alive. Meanwhile, the professor finally detects the officers moving through the Mint's vent. He immediately calls Berlin and orders him to switch to plane B. He's ordered everyone to switch from Dali masks to masks of the famous painting, The Scream. Now, the 2 undercover cops wearing the Dali masks will stand out instantly. Meanwhile, the surgery was successful, and it's time for the medics to head out. Angel sees the mask change, and when he gets out, he immediately informs Raquel of the change. Raquel frantically tries to warn the officers to abort, but communication is breaking down. The officers have no choice but to retreat. Later, the robbers decide to watch TV to see what people are saying about them. Rio flips through channels and suddenly freezes. His parents are on screen being interviewed. They're calling him a terrorist, saying he's no longer their son, that it's like he died. You can see Rio's heart break in real time. Meanwhile, Raquel is beyond exhausted and heads home. Later that night, Angel calls Raquel. He's been drinking and finally admits what's been eating at him. He asks if she'd actually sleep with that stranger from the bar, the one who likes Andy Warhol. The professor is listening to every word through the hidden microphone in Angel's glasses. Raquel says yes, she would, and gently tells Angel to move on from whatever they had 8 years ago. The professor hears this. Later in the episode, Berlin is alone in his private office, about to inject himself with a dose of a medicine called Retroxil. That's when Tokyo enters, and Berlin immediately hides it. Tokyo confronts Berlin about ordering Monica's execution and demands he call the professor to confess. Berlin, always theatrical, agrees. He won't let Tokyo be the snitch, so he'll tell the professor himself. Berlin makes the call. He admits he violated the first rule and had Denver kill a hostage, Monica. The professor's stunned into silence. This is the one line they were never supposed to cross. Berlin tries to justify it, saying Monica had a phone hidden and was going to call the police, but the professor can barely speak. Berlin challenges him to punish him, to prove that he's a real leader, but the professor's just too shocked. The whole plan might be completely unraveling. Episode 7 opens with the police finally catching a break. After scrubbing through hours of surveillance footage, they spot something on the day Rio and Tokyo visited the Royal Mint. Car keys. Specifically, keys to a 1992 Seat Ibiza. It's their first real lead, and Inspector Raquel immediately orders a full search for the vehicle. The professor overhears the plan and calls Helsinki to confirm the car is destroyed at a junkyard. But here's the problem. Helsinki confesses he never actually watched them crush it. Worse, he sent the 1,000 euros the professor gave him to his family instead. Oh. And he has no idea what fingerprints are, so the car is sitting there covered in their DNA. This is bad. It's really bad. The professor has no choice but to go to the junkyard himself. The thing is, it's Sunday and the place is closed. He breaks in anyway and immediately gets spotted by the guard, Nikolai. After a chase through the scrapyard, the professor hides in an old car, but Nikolai isn't playing around. He lifts the entire car with the professor inside using a crane. When he finally gets down, the professor tries to buy the Ibiza back, but he doesn't have enough cash. Nikolai throws him out. I think the professor might be losing his touch. Later, the professor receives a call from the police, suggesting that he free some hostages. He agrees to release Allison, the ambassador's daughter, instead of 8 students. But here's the twist. He recorded the entire conversation and leaked it to radio stations across the country. The media tears into the police for prioritizing diplomatic relations over Spanish teenagers.
Diplomatic relations are considered more important than the the lives of 8 Spanish teenagers.
Public opinion swings back in the gang's favor. I never doubted you, Professor. Raquel's team then searches the scrapyard. Hearing this, the professor races back to the junkyard and starts frantically cleaning every surface with ammonia. He even plants a button for Berlin's jacket inside as false evidence. When Raquel spots someone moving around, the professor makes his escape disguised as a homeless beggar.
The professor had made himself look like human waste.
He reeks of ammonia and trash, and the cop is so disgusted he just lets him go. After he leaves, Raquel finds the cleaning products and realizes what happened. The mastermind was just here. That homeless man, it was him. She was inches away from catching the professor, and he slipped right through her fingers. Episode 8 opens with the professor's leaked recording of Raquel playing everywhere. The media is tearing her apart for choosing to save Allison Parker over 8 Spanish teenagers. Public opinion is completely swung to the robber's side, which means the police can't risk intervening. But the real damage is personal. Raquel's ex-husband asked their daughter Paula if she wants to live with him instead. Paula says yes. Raquel tries to explain her father hurt her, but Paula doesn't believe it. In a flashback, the professor explains why public support is everything. He tells the crew about the 2011 Puerta del Sol occupation, when 20,000 young people camped out for a month in buildings and the police never went in. Why? Because the entire country supported them. The robbers will be the same kind of resistance, and no minister would give the order to enter because there are minors inside. Raquel refuses to quit despite the backlash. She demands forensic results and wants to know how the robbers plan to escape. In the flashback, the gang asks the professor the same question. They're gonna have to dig a tunnel, but that's just a decoy. They're going to make a tunnel leading to the sewers where radar will detect them. The real tunnel is already built, 28 yards away, leading to a prepared hangar, and they only have to dig through a vault to get there. Wow. That's brilliant. Meanwhile, forensics confirm somebody cleaned the car with ammonia just minutes before they arrived. They found a fingerprint on a button inside. It's Berlin's. Raquel realizes the homeless man getting there first wasn't a coincidence. There must be a mole among them. Inside the mint, Berlin gathers the hostages, and he straight up tells them he executed Monica.
I can confirm that your colleague Monica was in fact executed.
Yikes. This dude is cold-blooded. Outside the mint, Raquel has investigated the fingerprint found on the button, and she wants to leak Berlin's file to turn public opinion, but the colonel pushes back. Raquel makes the call anyway. She leaks Berlin's files and makes Berlin out to be a pimp. Inside the mint, Tokyo overhears Rio chatting with Allison. Tokyo gets jealous and confronts Allison. But while she's at it, for whatever reason, Tokyo kisses Allison. Outside the mint, Raquel isn't done with Berlin yet. She tracks down his former cellmate. The dude reveals Berlin used to inject Rectrosil daily for a degenerative condition. So Angel starts researching pharmacy records. At the same time, Nikolai from the scrapyard was invited to create a police sketch of the professor. The professor hears this and starts digging for dirt to prevent him from showing up. If he succeeds, the professor's anonymity is gone. Episode 9 opens with Denver asleep in the vault next to Monica. When he wakes up, he jokes about her still being there, which sets Monica off. She's furious. Denver claims that he saved her life, but Monica's not having it. Denver apologizes and offers to take her to the bathroom. Meanwhile, news outlets are running the smear campaign on Berlin. They claim Berlin was involved in human trafficking, pimping women from Eastern Europe, extorting minors, and snitching on his fellow criminals. Nairobi confronts him about this, but Berlin just grabs her by the neck and denies everything. His personal moral code won't let him sell women or rat out colleagues. But killing a pregnant woman is fine? Okay. Then he hears the real kicker. His identity was uncovered because of a jacket button found in the professor's car. He remembers that jacket. Denver wore it when he snuck out to a party. Berlin hunts for Denver with Helsinki and Oslo's help. Nairobi tries to stop him, but Berlin values his reputation and dignity above everything else. Meanwhile, the professor has a new plan to stop Nikolai. He gets into an empty police car and speaks Russian over the radio. He threatens to kill Nikolai's wife and daughter if he helps the police with a composite sketch. Nikolai immediately erases the sketch and flees the tent, leaving the police to figure out what just happened. Later at a bar, Angel tells Raquel about Rectrosil. It treats Helmer's myopathy, a degenerative neurological disease. Even with the medication, Berlin has a 9 out of 10 chance of dying within 24 months. The man literally has nothing to lose. In the mint, Berlin finally finds Denver, and unfortunately he finds Monica too. He knows that she's alive.
She was dead on Friday.
Guns are drawn and everything gets chaotic, but Nairobi tries to calm things down. Berlin calls the professor, who reveals that he planted that button as punishment for ordering Monica's execution. Berlin tries to turn it around by telling him Monica's alive, but the professor sees through it. If she's alive, it's not because of Berlin. He then orders Plan Valencia, a fake massacre inside the mint. Tokyo and Oslo fire at rollers while the hostages scream at the top of their lungs. Raquel hears the gunfire and immediately calls the professor, demanding proof of life for each hostage within an hour. The professor agrees. Episode 10 opens with some serious bullying. Allison, the ambassador's daughter, is cornered by her classmates in the bathroom. They're not happy she gets to walk free while they're stuck inside, so they gang up on her, pushing her around, getting up in her face. But before things get too ugly, Nairobi steps in and shuts it down. She grabs the ringleader by the crotch and makes him cluck like a chicken until he's properly humiliated.
A bit louder.
Kukanaku!
Yeah, that'll teach him. Nairobi has Helsinki take the brats away, but keeps Allison behind. Alone with her, Nairobi tells her she needs to show those kids who's boss. Meanwhile, Angel tells Raquel about a pharmacy he tracked down that's been filling orders for Retrosil, the drug Berlin's taking for his terminal illness. Raquel tells him to get a warrant and check it out alone in secret. Inside the Mint, Helsinki surprises Arturo by reuniting him with Monica. At the same time, Raquel calls the professor and tells him she needs to enter the Mint personally to verify the hostages are okay. When she arrives, Tokyo frisks her and finds a microphone hidden in her underwear, handing it over to Rio. The hostages are brought out one by one, starting with Arturo. Later in the episode, one of the hostages, Ariadna, has sex with Berlin in his office in exchange for her survival. After Raquel leaves, she reveals that microphone was actually carrying a video message from Rio's parents, begging him to turn himself in. They promise he'll get less than a year if he cooperates. Berlin gathers the crew and admits the truth about his disease, but he doesn't want pity. He wants to celebrate that they're alive, and the plan is working. He raises a toast to life and to the plan. Meanwhile, Angel's been doing his own investigation. He trails the professor to a workshop and shows up at his door. Angel says he was just in the neighborhood and saw the professor entering the place. The professor lets him in and starts making small talk. The professor tells Angel this is where he makes apple cider. Good cover. They discuss the cider and also ask about his relationship with Raquel. The professor admits he talks to her and they're getting to know each other. Angel's looking around the place when he gets a call. He excuses himself and leaves, but what the professor doesn't realize is that Angel pocketed a coffee spoon from his workshop. Later, Angel hands it over to forensics. He wants them to compare the fingerprints on it against the one found in the car Professor used to threaten Nikolai. Outside the Mint, there's trouble. When Angel reaches the pharmacy, somebody's already robbed it and taken all the records. Only he and Raquel knew about this lead. What Angel doesn't know is the professor orchestrated this, sacrificing his Trojan horse to lead Angel straight into suspicion. Episode 11 starts with Angel on the phone with Raquel, stunned that somebody robbed the pharmacy before he got there. Only the two of them knew about this lead, which means there's a traitor, and Angel knows that it isn't him. He tries desperately to convince Raquel to suspect Salva, that strange guy from the cafe, but she refuses to believe him. Meanwhile, Colonel Prieto plants seeds of doubt, telling Raquel he's not sure he'd risk his neck for the deputy inspector. The implication is clear. Maybe Angel is the mole. Inside the Mint, there's a breakthrough. Moscow hits dirt after days of digging through the vault door, which means the escape tunnel is actually possible. Nairobi's got the printing presses running at full capacity, and they're sitting on over 400 million euros. Berlin's practically giddy, telling everybody the world moves because of money, and they're making it beat right here. But while the robbers celebrate, Arturo is scheming. He tracks down Jacinto, one of the security guards being held in the basement, and whispers to him through the bathroom stall. Arturo's got scissors and can steal more tools, screwdrivers, and a handsaw. He tells Jacinto to come back in 2 hours, and he'll leave the tools in the second stall on the left. Jacinto's terrified, but Arturo reminds him that 67 lives are in his hands. Outside, Raquel's team briefs her on the explosives the robbers have placed at every entrance, even the ventilation ducts. The robbers have turned the Mint into a bunker. Just then, Rio calls Raquel from the Mint. Raquel tries convincing him to help the police stop the whole operation, and she offers a reduced sentence if he surrenders. But Rio is ready for this. The professor already warned him about this exact play. Rio counters with the reality. He'd get hundreds of years minimum. He then says he wants a pardon from the Prime Minister on live TV instead. In the Mint, Denver brings treats to Monica, and things get intimate. There's a surprising amount of romance in the middle of this armed robbery. Anyway, back to Arturo and his plot. He successfully gets the tools to Jacinto, taping detailed instructions explaining the escape plan. At 9 p.m., when the robbers bring dinner down to the basement, the security guards and police officers will disarm their captors and escape, while Arturo will gather the hostages. Doesn't really sound like a solid plan, if I'm being honest. Outside the Mint, things have progressed a bit between Raquel and the professor. They've been seeing each other more, and now they're meeting for dinner. But she's got her own suspicions brewing. The flirtation over dinner quickly turns into confrontation, as she pulls a gun on him under the table. Raquel tells him she thinks he's hiding something in his workshop. Either he takes her there willingly, or she'll wait for a search warrant. It's up to him. Episode 12 opens with Angel leaving Raquel another voicemail. He's been driving and drinking, rambling on and on. He's terrified Raquel will ruin his life and get him dismissed from the force. Meanwhile, Raquel's got the professor at gunpoint in his warehouse, forcing him to show her what he's hiding under all those tarps. He nervously explains it's just a cider-making project. When Raquel asks to taste the cider, he pours her a glass, and she believes him. She apologizes for pointing her gun at him. They promptly start making out, and they later make love. Wow, this guy's performance is working pretty well, honestly. Meanwhile, Angel gets the call that he's been waiting for. Forensics tells him the fingerprints on the police car match exactly with the prints on the spoon he took from the professor's warehouse. He tries calling Raquel, but her voicemail is full. He's still desperately trying to reach Raquel, leaving frantic messages about how he's got the guy who's helping the robbers from outside. His phone dies mid-message. Distracted and devastated, he doesn't see an obstacle ahead. His car goes flying, and he crashes. Back at the Mint, Arturo's escape plan is in motion. He convinces Helsinki to let him see Monica, claiming he needs to apologize to her. But when he tracks her down in the vault, he catches her having sex with Denver. Yeah, that's enough to trigger him. Arturo is appalled and tells Helsinki to take her away. Then he attacks Denver. Denver pulls a gun on him, forcing Arturo to reveal the escape plan. Down in the basement, Jacinto frees the others with the tools Arturo provided. When Oslo shows up to bring food, he gets knocked out. The hostages then make their escape. Jacinto pushes a cart at the bombed entrance to trigger it from afar. The explosion creates an opening in the building, letting the police rescue the hostages. Later at the hospital, Raquel learns from Angel's wife Mari that he'd been drinking and has called Raquel several times. In a flashback, the professor opens up to Nairobi about his father. He was a sick child, bedridden in hospital for years. His father would tell him stories about heist movies, except they weren't movies. They were his father's own robberies. One day, his father told him about a place called the Money House, where you could print money without stealing it from anybody. That same day, his father was shot multiple times at a bank. His dad was the inspiration this whole time. Meanwhile, at the Mint, all hell breaks loose. The police are still at the entrance with smoke grenades and covering fire. The robbers are already there, returning the fire, and it's not looking good. Helsinki gets hit, but his vest stops the bullet. Tokyo grabs a heavy machine gun and unleashes hell on the police. Moscow and Denver scramble to seal the entrance while Helsinki yells for Oslo, but no one can find him. Helsinki finds Oslo in the basement, still unconscious, and the professor watches the chaos unfold, knowing everything is falling apart. The last episode in Season 1 opens with the robbers gathered around Oslo. He's been beaten unconscious by Jacinto. Oslo's eyes are open but empty. Hope is falling like dominoes, and the remaining hostages notice the robbers are losing control. In a flashback, the professor explains that as time goes on, the hostages will lose their compliance. Their survival instinct will kick in, and they're going to try something. To regain control, the robbers need empathy. They'll need to offer something that unites people more than fear: money. The plan is to give hostages a choice: stay and become accomplices for 1 million euros, or leave and cross the line to freedom. But the truth is, those who choose to leave will actually be locked up separately. Yeah, can't trust a robber to keep his word. Outside, the police interrogate the escaped hostages. Raquel arrives, and Colonel Prieto shows her the microphone hidden in Angel's glasses, proof that he wasn't a traitor. She listens in horror to his voicemails, claiming his innocence, explaining that Salva is the mole. Completely devastated, Raquel runs to the Mint and just stands there in the open, waiting to be shot by Helsinki until her colleagues pull her away. Meanwhile, Raquel's mother receives Angel's last message, the one that says Salva is the spy. Not knowing who Salva really is, she calls the professor to tell him about the message. The professor realizes that his cover is blown. He goes to the mom's house and slips poison into her coffee, but as the woman praises him for being good to her daughter, guilt overwhelms him. When she raises the cup to her lips, he knocks it from her hand. The professor decides instead to just delete Angel's message from the mom's phone, and when Raquel arrives, relieved, she falls into his arms. Later, Raquel gets a call from the office. The police found an estate near a pharmacy in Toledo, where neighbors heard explosions all summer. She asks Salva to drive her there. Back at the Mint, Nairobi and Tokyo offer the hostages their choice: 1 million euros or freedom. Most stay, including Allison and Arturo. Those who choose to leave are locked in the basement. Meanwhile, Raquel arrives at the estate with a full forensics team. She finds everything: timetables, photos, maps, the whole plan laid out on the walls. She's totally ecstatic, but the professor waits in the car outside, unaware his entire operation has just been exposed. Season 2, Episode 1 opens with the police raiding the Toledo estate. Forensic teams swarm the house, finding DNA evidence everywhere. But something doesn't add up. The professor had meticulously planned this, leading police to a crime scene littered with DNA from people who had nothing to do with the robbery. Raquel calls for Alberto, her ex-husband, and a forensic investigator to come analyze the scene. Inside the Mint, 80 hours into the heist, Moscow tries calling the professor. There's no answer. It's been 18 hours since they last heard from him. Berlin wants to wait, but Tokyo's getting antsy. Berlin says they'll wait 6 more hours before starting Plan Chernobyl, which is to basically throw money outside to cause public mayhem while they escape within the chaos. Back at the estate, the professor tries to leave, but is told that nobody's going to go anywhere. Meanwhile, the gang inside the Mint watches the news. The professor's been arrested and is being interrogated in Toledo.
They arrested the professor.
Shit, they're interrogating him at the house in Toledo.
Tokyo immediately wants to start Plan Chernobyl, but Berlin stops her. They'd lose all the money. Berlin calls for a vote. Who still believes in the professor? Helsinki votes yes. Rio votes no. He's with Tokyo. Moscow says he accepted the rules, and the rules haven't been broken. He trusts the professor. Denver votes to get out now. It's 3-3. Nairobi's the tiebreaker. She says, unless the professor is dead, she'll believe in him. She's with Berlin. Meanwhile, Helsinki makes a devastating decision. Thinking Oslo will never recover from the comatose state that he's in, Helsinki euthanizes him. Damn. The episode ends with Tokyo leading Denver and Rio as they storm Berlin's office and lead him out of the place. Episode 2 opens with Alberto driving the professor to Madrid. The professor complains about a stomach bug and asks Alberto to pull over, claiming he needs to use the bathroom urgently. Alberto stops, and the professor gets out of the car. But instead of relieving himself, Professor just rummages through trash, tears a page from a newspaper, and sets it on fire with his lighter. When Alberto approaches, he quickly stuffs the ashes in his wallet and gets back into the car. Who knows what he's up to? Meanwhile, Raquel insists somebody tampered with Angel's car, that the same person who's been helping the robbers from outside tried to murder Angel, and will try again if he wakes up from his coma. This time, she's setting the trap. In the car, the professor confronts Alberto about sleeping with Raquel's sister and hitting on their daughter's teacher. He tells Alberto he needs psychiatric help, but not Raquel. Naturally, Alberto gets pissed, and they trade blows, but the professor easily overpowers Alberto and leaves him unconscious in a field. Is this still part of the plan? Inside the Mint, Tokyo's holding Berlin hostage with Denver and Rio's help. She smashes vials of his medicine, Retroxil, and demands Berlin tell her about Plan Chernobyl at gunpoint. Berlin refuses and warns Tokyo that he's the only one who knows how to get out. Meanwhile, Alberto wakes up and immediately arrests the professor for assault. Back at the Mint, Berlin's had enough of Tokyo's rebellion, so he orders Helsinki to grab her. Helsinki ties her up, throws her on a cart, and Berlin wheels her out of the building. The police see her coming and freeze, convinced that she's rigged with explosives. When one officer finally gets close enough, Tokyo jumps him and makes a run for it, but the police tackle her and tie her up. We flash back to the professor revealing his actual name to Tokyo, Sergio Marquina. He tells her no matter how bad things get, he's never going to abandon his crew. At the police station, the professor's glued to the news coverage of Tokyo's capture. Inside the Mint, Berlin tries selling the story that Tokyo lost her mind, but Rio's not buying it, and he calls Berlin a psychopath. Nairobi backs Rio up, making it clear they're loyal to the professor, not Berlin. Rio announces he's done. He walks out. Berlin pulls him into a hug, and then stabs him with a tranquilizer.
Trust me.
Jeez, this guy's gonna do anything to stay in control. Meanwhile, Tokyo's dragged into the police tent half naked and thrown in front of the colonel for interrogation. When Raquel shows up, she cuts straight to the one question that matters. Who is the professor? Episode 3 opens with a flashback showing how Rio first set up the voice-changing system for the professor. It takes him a few tries to nail the final sound.
You're speaking with the big leopard.
In the present, the professor gets his one phone call from the police station. He tells Raquel that he's been detained and might be facing jail time. She promises that she'll come. Meanwhile, Raquel's trying to crack Tokyo during interrogation, hoping she'll give up the professor's identity. Tokyo just unloads her tragic backstory instead, explaining how her life went downhill ever since she got expelled from primary school. Not exactly the intel Raquel was hoping for. Back at the Mint, Nairobi confronts Berlin for handing Tokyo over to the cops. Berlin's response? This is a patriarchy, and he's in charge. When Rio finally wakes up from that tranquilizer, Nairobi tells him how Tokyo had coldly told her that her son probably wouldn't even recognize her anymore. Rio tries to comfort her, suggesting that she could have another child and start over. Nairobi seems to take that to heart. For her, it's enough to keep going. At the police station, Professor asks to use the bathroom and proceeds to beat himself up, literally slamming his own chest with a bar of soap stuffed in a sock to fake an assault. When Raquel arrives, she demands he show Alberto the injury.
The victim appears to have bruises on his chest, ribs, and abdomen.
Alberto folds, and just like that, the professor is free. Raquel tears up the detention report and walks out with him. Back in the Mint once again, Rio turns on Berlin, screaming that he won't follow his orders anymore. Helsinki promptly knocks him down with one hit and drags him off. Berlin decides Rio's punishment for treason is execution. He aims the gun, but his hand's shaking too much to pull the trigger cleanly. Nairobi and Denver rush in, but Berlin fires anyway. Thankfully, though, he misses. Meanwhile, Tokyo's being taken out of the tent when she suddenly blurts out the professor's name, Sergio. But when Raquel asks for more information than just a common first name, Tokyo lies straight to her face. Naturally, Raquel gets pissed off, and Tokyo's taken to jail. The professor immediately calls Berlin and scolds him for what he's done. At this point, Nairobi's had enough. She knocks Berlin out cold and tells the professor that she's taking over. This whole operation is falling apart really quickly. Episode 4 starts with Nairobi filling the professor in on just how badly things have spiraled. From Berlin handing Tokyo over to the cops to almost executing Rio. She also tells him that Helsinki ended Oslo's suffering for good. Speaking of, Helsinki locks Rio up with the other hostages. Allison immediately hugs him, and Arturo seizes the moment to pitch an escape plan to strike when the robbers are weak. Rio suggests they swap one of the gang's real guns for a fake one. That way, the hostages get an actual weapon, while the robbers are left holding a useless prop. Berlin agrees to follow Nairobi's lead and explains Plan Chernobyl, to dump €1 billion over Madrid from the sky, then vanish in the chaos. Arturo then manages to grab the keys to the office where the fake guns are stored and starts crawling toward it. He sneaks back out with a fake gun and hands it off to Monica. Outside the Mint, the professor calls Raquel with a new move. He wants to release 11 hostages. He pushes Raquel to get journalists on site to cover the release live. We flash back to the professor using a Brazil versus Cameroon football match as an example to illustrate how people love rooting for the underdog. Now, Nairobi's launching Plan Cameroon. Berlin will give an interview as the hostages walk out, so the police can see the robbers as human. Raquel thinks the interview is a distraction to keep the police off balance. She then pitches a counter trap, announce that Angel, the one person who figured out someone was helping the robbers from the outside, is waking up from his coma, then flood the hospital with undercover agents before the culprit can finish him off. Denver calls Monica to his room for her treatment, and she used the opportunity to swap the fake gun for Denver's real one. A TV crew rolls into the Mint while Raquel orders her escorts to tail them inside. Berlin leads them straight to the 11 hostages set for release, then hits them with a curveball. He and his crew want to surrender. They've lost. While a police team escorts the hostages out to safety, Berlin wheels out Oslo's body as proof. He tells the cameras he's never sold anybody out, despite what the police claim, and completely breaks down. He accuses the police of lying to the public and destroying his family's name. The professor reassures Nairobi that no matter what, he's getting Tokyo out of jail. Berlin warns him that the news about Angel possibly waking up is clearly a trap. The professor already knows. He's fully aware the hospital is crawling with agents waiting for him, but he's got a plan to pull them away. Episode 5 starts with a group of clowns at the hospital, but security boots all of them except for one. That lone clown is the professor. Man, he's good. He strolls into a children's ward and hands out a stuffed rabbit. When someone opens the door to Angel's old room, the agents inside brace to shoot, but it's just a kid holding the rabbit. Turns out there's a camera hidden inside of the rabbit's eye. The professor watches the feed remotely, confirms the trap, and then slips out. The other clowns, they were just random people responding to a fake casting call that he posted. Meanwhile, a TV reporter announces there were 0 trafficking or pimping cases on file against Berlin. The reporter suggests the police may have spread lies to turn public opinion against the robbers. Inside the Mint, Arturo pulls his real gun on Denver, who's stunned to realize his own gun is fake. Meanwhile, Berlin returns to free Rio from handcuffs and tells him the professor is working on getting Tokyo out. Just then, Rio remembers Arturo's escape plan. Speaking of, Arturo drags Denver toward the exit and orders Monica to open the doors. Rio locks the door through the security system just in time, and Berlin, Moscow, and Nairobi rush in. Arturo's about to shoot Denver when Monica smacks him in the head. Damn, she just dropped the father of her kid. Outside the Mint, Raquel meets the professor at a cafe where he's left her an envelope full of beach photos they're going to visit together. Then she notices something, an orange hair on his suit. She goes to the bathroom and calls an officer who confirms the clown at the hospital is wearing an orange wig. It finally clicks. Her new boyfriend is the one helping the robbers. Raquel calls Alberto and tells him to compare the fingerprints on the police station trays and Alberto's car handle with the ones on the spoon Angel had collected earlier. Raquel gets back to Salva and tricks him into getting into the bathroom with her. Then she handcuffs the professor and places him under arrest. Back at the Mint, a completely exhausted Helsinki and Rio grab Arturo and force him to strip. Helsinki finds stolen cash on him and tapes explosives to his body as punishment. If Arturo moves even slightly or starts sweating, he's done. Monica realizes she's crossed a line she can't come back from. Denver agrees that if she stays, she definitely is going to go to jail, so he offers her a way out. Join the crew under a new name, Stockholm. Meanwhile, Raquel drives Salva to the Toledo house and drags him inside. Remember Ariadna? Turns out Berlin wants something more from her. Berlin offers Ariadna a ticket to somewhere far away so he can spend his final days with her. Berlin sees Nairobi is completely burned out from managing the hostages, and he has to take back control. She hands over the reins, and he immediately orders the hostages to keep digging the tunnel non-stop unless they want to end up like Arturo, a walking bomb. In episode 6, as the hostages dig, the police seismographs immediately pick up the activity, and 20 officers are dispatched to guard the sewer the tunnel is heading towards. At the Toledo house, Raquel's got Salva tied up with his hands above his head, hanging from the ceiling. She demands to know who he really is. He tells her, Sergio Marquina, the professor. He stopped renewing his national ID over 20 years ago, so he'd be nearly impossible to trace. Raquel is livid. She trusted him, and he played her from day one. But the professor confesses that he genuinely did fall in love with her. She slaps him over and over again before storming out, leaving him hanging. Inside the Mint, Berlin tells Rio the professor has 4 men on standby ready to step in if anything goes wrong. They're the ones tasked with freeing Tokyo. Speaking of that, a van blocks the convoy transporting Tokyo. The men jump out and spray black paint all over the police van's windows, then plant a fake time bomb inside. The 2 officers in front panic, and they bail out, but there's no explosion. The men pin them down and storm the back of the van. One cop inside is terrified, but the other presses his gun right to Tokyo's head. The men threaten to shoot unless he lets her go, and the cop complies. The men give Tokyo a police uniform and bulletproof vest, hand her a police motorbike, and then send her off. It's quite the dramatic exit. After hearing Tokyo escaped, the police ordered every gate out of Madrid blocked, but she's not heading anywhere outside Madrid. She's on her way to the most guarded place in Madrid right now, the Mint. Meanwhile, Denver tells Moscow he's planning to escape with Monica and raise her baby. Moscow warns him against it, telling him that trying to save others can drag you down instead. He then opens up about his past. Apparently, Denver's mother didn't abandon them like Moscow made him believe. Moscow had repeatedly tried to help her overcome a drug addiction, spending all of his savings on rehab clinics, but she just kept relapsing. After the fourth failed attempt, he gave up, picked up young Denver, and then moved out. Denver doesn't take this well. He's furious. He swears he'll cut ties with his father the second they get out of this. Back in Toledo, Raquel walks in with a heavy briefcase and hooks the professor up to a lie detector. And the guy confesses to everything. He admits he didn't directly cause Angel's accident. The heist idea came from his father, who needed the money for hospital bills when the professor was sick, and he swears his love for Raquel is real. When Raquel learns Tokyo escaped, the professor casually explains he'd pre-planned it all along. Raquel's done listening, and she orders him to stand up. But as she's leading him out, the professor grabs her by the throat and chokes her until she collapses. So that's what love means, huh? Meanwhile, Rio calls Tokyo on Allison's phone. The police immediately detect it, but they talk openly, fully where the police are listening. Tokyo heads straight for the Mint. Everyone, the cops, the gang, they all scramble when they realize Tokyo is coming back. The robbers throw the doors open as she speeds in on the bike, bullets flying everywhere. Tokyo makes it inside, but Moscow gets hit in the crossfire. The episode ends with Moscow collapsing in Denver's arms inside the Mint. Episode 7 starts with Moscow seriously injured. He took 3 bullets in the stomach, and everybody's scrambling to save him. Denver's losing it as they try to stabilize his dad with whatever medical supplies they have. Moscow tries to stay calm, but the reality is grim. He's bleeding out very fast. Meanwhile, Raquel wakes up to find the professor has escaped his restraints. He could have killed her, could have run, but instead, he puts down the gun and tries one more time to prove that he's telling the truth, but she's not buying it. She promises to put him in jail, and when he walks away, she fires a warning shot. He keeps walking, daring her to actually shoot him. She can't bring herself to do it. He drives off with her phone, leaving her stranded on a country road. Back inside the Mint, Tokyo's desperate. She tells Berlin they need to call a doctor because Moscow won't survive without one. Berlin calls Colonel Prieto, requesting a surgeon. The colonel's got a deal. Send Moscow out unarmed and they'll treat him. Naturally, Berlin refuses. While all this is going on, Prieto suddenly spots CCTV footage of Raquel kissing the professor at Cafe Hanoi. Raquel hitchhikes back to the police tent, where she's immediately confronted. Alberto and Prieto accuse her of sabotaging the investigation and conspiring with the professor. She insists that she didn't know who he was, but the evidence looks damning. She demands Alberto leave since he's got a restraining order, but the damage is done. Inside the Mint, Moscow is fading fast. Berlin orders everybody to keep printing money. They're so close to finishing. Meanwhile, Denver's digging the tunnel with Rio, desperate to get his father out alive. Moscow refuses to go to the hospital because that means jail. He'd rather die with his son than rot in a cell. Outside the Mint, the professor calls again, but Prieto answers. He reveals they know his real name, and they're coming for him. The professor's response? Surrendering was never an option. Whoa. Meanwhile, Raquel realizes she's no longer needed. She's had enough. Raquel slams down her badge and gun, storms out, and decides to do this on her own. She steals Angel's police badge and uniform to conduct her own investigation, but just as she leaves, Angel wakes up from his coma. In the Mint, Ariadna confesses to Monica that her relationship with Berlin is purely for survival. She thought the gang was killing hostages and pretended to fall for Berlin to stay alive. Now he wants to marry her when this is over. She's disgusted by him and plans to take all of his money as revenge. Nairobi overhears everything. Ooh, man. Episode 8 starts with Raquel tracking down the professor's hideout. She's working from her mom's place, mapping out how far the professor could have walked from the Cafe Hanoi in 5 to 7 minutes. She figures his hideout is nearby, and starts requesting CCTV footage from October 23rd, the day they first met. Meanwhile, the professor meets with a Ukrainian doctor who agrees to help save Moscow. The surgeon needs abdominal surgery equipment, a medical ventilator, and surgical gear. The entire time, the police are also tracking the professor using cell tower data, trying to triangulate his location. Inside the Mint, Moscow is almost gone. In a heartbreaking conversation with Tokyo, Moscow tells her that Denver hates him. Tokyo reassures him that his son actually adores him because of how Moscow raised him. Moscow opens up about abandoning his wife, and how he went back to trying to fix his mistake. Meanwhile, Denver and Rio are digging the tunnel when suddenly they hear something on the other side. It's the professor and his team. They're ecstatic. Just 30 or 40 centimeters left to break through. But upstairs, Monica rushes to get Denver. It's urgent. He needs to see his father immediately, or it might be too late. Denver confesses to Moscow that he could never hate him. Moscow asks Monica to take care of Denver and tells his son to carry on his work without regret. Denver weeps as Moscow closes his eyes and breathes his last. The news reaches the professor through Berlin, and even he can't control his emotions. Outside the Mint, Raquel continues narrowing down the professor's location, using camera footage. The police get wind of what she's doing, and the colonel activates an intervention protocol. Then news arrives that an arrest warrant has been issued for Raquel. In the Mint, Denver says a prayer for his father and seals his coffin next to Oslo's. Tokyo reaches the end of the tunnel and holds the professor's hands through the hole. The professor emerges through the vault, and Berlin, Helsinki, and Nairobi embrace him. He meets Denver, who's still weeping over his father's coffin, and Denver introduces Monica to him. Nairobi shows Professor the money.
984 million euros.
984 million euros. It's way less than the 2.4 billion they were going for, but still a massive haul. Police agents start patrolling the sewer system just as another team approaches the Mint. The professor orders Berlin to move the money. Meanwhile, Raquel shows up at the warehouse. She's tracked the professor's location and arrives just in time to put a gun to the professor's head.
Now you're coming with me to the station.
One of the professor's men spots Raquel and aims at her, but she's holding the professor so he can't shoot her. While she's distracted, another guy shows up behind Raquel and grabs her. He's just foiled her whole plan. Back in the Mint, the hostages start transporting the money through the vault. It gets loaded into drums and trucks to be taken through the tunnel. Meanwhile, the professor tends to Raquel, who's been tied and suspended from the ceiling, just like the professor was at the Toledo house. The professor insists that falling in love with her wasn't part of his plan. Then Angel calls. His phone is tapped, so Raquel uses another phone to call him back. He's awake. Raquel breaks down, hearing his voice. Angel asks her to come see him before he tells anybody else he's recovered. She needs to get to Angel before he reveals the professor's location to the police. The professor isn't sure he can trust her, but Raquel insists that she's with him. She even kisses him to prove it before she leaves for the hospital. Episode 9, the season finale, opens with Nairobi pushing to print 1 billion euros. They're so close, but Berlin shuts her down. Meanwhile, the professor orders Berlin to stop and leave immediately because the police are closing in. Meanwhile, Colonel Prieto gets word that the call to Raquel came from Angel's phone. He immediately sends men to the hospital, thinking Raquel could show up at any minute. Speaking of which, she's already there. At the hospital, Raquel apologizes to Angel and offers him the hangar's location so she can clear her reputation. Angel already knows where it is. Raquel admits she knows too, but she won't tell him. Just then, the police storm in and arrest her. After so long, police forces finally storm the Mint. An explosion goes off, and then chaos erupts. Rio drags Tokyo away as they fire back at the police. Tokyo gets shot, and Rio's in trouble until Denver arrives. Monica joins in too, guns blazing. At the hospital, Prieto calls Angel and interrogates him about why Raquel visited. Angel says it's because she's his friend. The colonel threatens to arrest him unless he gives up the hangar's address, but Angel refuses. The hostages are given masks and told to exit. The cops order them to remove their masks, but Prieto stops him, realizing they're hostages and need to be rescued. Almost all the hostages run out safe after 128 hours of captivity, including Allison. The hostages then tell the colonel about the extra tunnel they didn't know about. Meanwhile, Berlin still believes Ariadna will marry him, but Nairobi calls them both to the vault, where the money's almost completely transported through the tunnel. Berlin orders everybody to leave through the tunnel immediately, even though it's risky. The professor warns that police are reaching the tunnel. Nairobi wants them all to leave together, but Berlin insists on staying behind to hold them off. Ariadna slaps him, so he puts a gun to her head and forces her to stay. Prieto shows Raquel a court warrant from Alberto requesting custody of their daughter. If she's found guilty, she'll lose her custody. Prieto forces her to choose her daughter or the professor. Under pressure, Raquel gives him the address to the hangar. The professor calls Berlin, begs him to enter the tunnel because it's about to blow. Berlin refuses.
Get in the tunnel.
Negative.
Berlin orders Helsinki to blow the tunnel, but the professor stops him. Berlin tells the professor he loves him, that he spent his life being an asshole, but today he wants to die with dignity. He stands up, and the police unleash a hail of bullets. As expected, Berlin goes down. The professor is heartbroken. He's just lost his older brother. They were half-brothers, Sergio and Andres. Ariadna, on the other hand, gets rescued by the police. Meanwhile, the police are almost at the hangar. They barge in and find it completely empty. Raquel breathes a sigh of relief. The professor and Helsinki had already driven out in a truck, while everyone else, including Denver and Monica, changed clothes and left one by one. They all escaped. 1 year later, Raquel is watching TV coverage of the heist. She's in Palawan, in the Philippines, exactly where the professor promised to take her. The news reports that the heist remains unsolved. The robbers got away with over 1 billion euros, and public opinion still views their actions as legitimate protest. Raquel left the police force after controversial statements criticizing how the crisis was handled. She walks through the streets to a Buddhist temple near a beach. Her phone dies, and she asks a stranger if they have a charger. That stranger is the professor. Moving on to Season 3. Episode 1 opens with Arturo Roman stepping out of a car and entering a theater. Turns out he's a motivational speaker now. He's milking his hostage experience for all it's worth. He tells the audience he's no hero. Just an ordinary man brave enough to refuse to kneel to terrorists. The crowd eats it up, chanting, "I make my own decisions, I face my problems." It's absolutely ridiculous. Meanwhile, the gang has been living in paradise for the past 2 years. Nairobi and Helsinki are in Argentina. Denver, Monica, and their son Cincinnati are in Indonesia. Tokyo and Rio have been on their own private island in Panama. But Tokyo is getting restless. She tells Rio she needs to leave. She needs noise, the chaos of not knowing where she'll be tomorrow. Rio gets it, but he's heartbroken. As she's leaving, he gives her a satellite phone he bought on the black market. It's supposedly unregistered. Tokyo heads to the city and goes wild, partying, dancing, drinking. After a few days, Rio gets bored and lonely, so he calls her. It's a big mistake. Europol intercepts the call. The authorities hunt them down pretty fast. Tokyo manages to escape, but Rio gets caught and arrested. In a flashback from 3 years ago, we see the gang escaping Portugal on a boat with nearly 1 billion euros. The professor hands out files containing safe locations on different continents where they can't be tracked. He also gives them emergency phone numbers, one per continent, connected to carriers who are sleeper agents that'll take them safely to him if things go wrong. Back in the present, Tokyo escapes to Colombia and contacts her carrier. After 11 days of intense travel, she finally reaches the professor at a temple in Thailand. She tells him what happened. The professor's been living in Palawan, Philippines with Raquel and her family. He asks them to leave for the island of Mindanao because Tokyo needs his help. When the two women meet, there's tension. The professor has trouble explaining that Raquel, the former inspector, is now on their side.
You think with your dick now?
Raquel slaps Tokyo hard, tells her to call her Lisbon. Speaking of which, Raquel figures out that the satellite phone Tokyo bought is registered and trackable. They realize that Rio's probably being tortured because the authorities haven't announced his arrest publicly. When Tokyo mentions Helsinki also bought one of those phones, the professor decides the whole gang needs to reunite for safety. Denver, Monica, Nairobi, and Helsinki arrive. They have dinner together, and Tokyo breaks the news about Rio. Nairobi and Denver are frustrated that Rio made such an avoidable mistake, but they agree to help. The professor reveals a new plan, another heist. This time, they're stealing gold from the Bank of Spain. This time, it's not his father's idea, but Berlin who wanted to do it. In a flashback 5 years earlier, the professor meets Berlin in Italy. Berlin has renovated an entire monastery where he's living with monks who've taken a vow of silence. He introduces the professor to Palermo and shows him plans to steal over 90 tons of gold from the Bank of Spain. The professor warns him that there's no way they'll leave alive, but Berlin brushes it off as a small detail. In the present, the gang heads to that same monastery to plan the heist. New members, Bogota, Palermo, and Marseille join them. This is also Monica and Raquel's first heist with the crew. They sit in a converted classroom with Berlin's portrait hanging on the wall. Days later, a massive airship floats above Madrid and starts raining money down on the city. 140 million euros pour from the sky. It's the gang's way of saying, we're back. Episode 2 starts with the airship flying over Madrid pouring euros down on the city. This is Plan Chernobyl from the first heist, originally meant to create chaos if everything went wrong. But now, it's exactly what they need to kick off the new plan. The professor reveals himself to the public with a video message. He talks directly to the people who believe in his little resistance and tells them Anibal Cortez, aka Rio, has been detained in a foreign country for almost 2 months with no formal charges. The professor demands Rio's illegal detention end immediately, then declares war on the state.
The state began this war, and we're not going to hide.
Colonel Prieto watches the video and immediately orders the strongest security measures. He wants the army in the streets, alert level raised to 5. He's not falling for the balloon distraction. He knows they're planning something big. In a flashback 2 months earlier in Italy, the professor visits Palermo. The meeting is tense. Palermo's bitter about the first heist, calling the professor a coward for not going inside while his brother did the dirty work. The professor tries to explain that there were unknowns, but Palermo cuts him off. He accuses the professor of sacrificing Berlin because it suited the plan. The professor finally admits the truth. The thought did cross his mind. He confesses he didn't factor in that Berlin might sacrifice himself. They embrace, both grieving, and the professor asks for Palermo's help to rob the Bank of Spain. Back in the present, the gang is tapping phones. Police, as well as Spain's National Intelligence Center, or CNI, they've outsourced Rio's hacking job to Pakistanis this time around. Tokyo, Palermo, Denver, Monica, Helsinki, Nairobi, and Bogota prepare to enter the bank dressed as army lieutenants with military trucks. The professor and Raquel are in the RV getting their equipment ready. Meanwhile, Rio is in custody with the heavily pregnant inspector Alicia Sierra. The gang arrives at the bank, surrounded by people protesting in red jumpsuits and security guards. The professor impersonates an army general on the phone and orders the guards to let them in. The civil guard disperses tear gas to keep the protesting crowds back, giving the gang the perfect cover to place explosives on the building. The professor explains the concept of Aikido to the gang, using the enemy's force to your advantage. They can't break into the Bank of Spain alone. The enemy's force is just too great. So the Civil Guard, the Spanish army, and even the bank's private security will do the work for them. They'll ensure that nobody comes close to the building. They'll evacuate it. They'll help get all the heist material inside. And they'll escort the extra hostages out. Speaking of, the hostage count for this heist is 367. Yeah, it's pretty insane. They're basically holding a whole village hostage. Once everybody's where they should be, Palermo pushes the button. He triggers explosions on the building's exterior, causing chaos. There's no turning back now. Episode 3 opens with the explosions hitting the Bank of Spain. The guards activate Code Red, sealing off the building. Once Code Red is activated, nobody can enter or leave the building for 1 hour. It's exactly the time they need to grab the governor of the Bank of Spain. The bank governor is in his office with 5 bodyguards. Nairobi, posing as a lieutenant, tells him that they have an armored car waiting to evacuate him, but the governor refuses to leave until the last employee has left. Nairobi's thinking about opening fire, but the math doesn't work. 5 bodyguards, 2 guns, each for her and Tokyo. There's still just too many. Tokyo goes to the bathroom and turns on the tap, flooding the floor. She storms back in, trying to lead the governor out, but Caesar Gandia, head of security, puts a gun to Nairobi's head. The governor orders him to release her, and Gandia reluctantly complies. But as they try to drag the governor toward the elevator, he breaks free and escapes their grip. In the main lobby, Palermo introduces himself to the hostages. He orders everybody to put on masks and hand over their phones. Meanwhile, the standoff with Gandia escalates. Palermo intervenes, but he gets hit by shrapnel and is temporarily blinded. Nairobi tells the hostages the explosives are at every entrance. She introduces Bogota and selects 4 volunteers to work in the vault. The CNI arrives, led by Luis Tamayo. Colonel Prieto puts Tamayo in charge and asks him to call Alicia to bring Rio to Madrid. In a flashback, Berlin tells the professor he has 3 years to live, but he wants to finish the heist. He tells the professor about the vault. It's deep underground, protected by a 14-ton steel door. The moment they create a hole in the vault, water pours in, and they have 16 minutes before it floods completely. Berlin's plan is to weld an interconnecting chamber to access the vault without opening the door. Nairobi orders the hostages to start welding. When the alarm sounds, Bogota goes in himself. Water rises as Bogota welds the antechamber. If the water reaches the joint before it's sealed, he's dead. Once Bogota seals the chamber, Nairobi enters in a diving suit, descending into the flooded vault. She sees bubbles rising, sparkling from the gold ingots below. 90 tons of pure gold. Nairobi services with Bogota, along with 2 gold ingots. Episode 4 starts with Nairobi ordering the team to get the ovens working and start melting down the National Reserve. Palermo, on the other hand, is getting treated, and his eyes are much better. Meanwhile, Tamayo learns the CNI's devices have been tapped by the gang. He breaks protocol and orders every device used in the past 6 months confiscated. This wipes out all the professor's tapped feeds, and everything goes dark. The professor's blinded. Tamayo plans to storm the bank in 14 minutes, but Bogota needs at least 2 hours to finish the work in the vault. In a flashback, Palermo explains that they're going to use shortwave signals with multiple layers of encryption. The professor reveals they'll only use old feature phones without internet or GPS, so calls can only be tracked while active. Marseille will move around Madrid with 2 receptor phones, so they can't be traced. In another flashback, the professor explains Palermo's flipper plan. The governor will open a second vault behind the flooded one, but he might refuse, and he's the only one who can. Back in the present, the governor does exactly this, and refuses. Denver then knocks the governor unconscious, triggering a seizure. Nairobi desperately tries to resuscitate the governor. His heart rate hits 150 beats per minute. They have 1 minute and 20 seconds before Tamayo storms in. In a flashback, Berlin reveals the backup plan. C4 explosives. It's unpredictable, crude, and also kind of exciting. Bogota enters the chamber with C4 and plants it on the vault door. The C4 detonates underwater, blowing the vault open. Episode 5 opens with Nairobi desperately trying to save the governor. His heart rate's through the roof. She injects him with diazepam, and finally he stabilizes. The assault teams are already outside with helicopters descending, and troops are coming into position. Code Red unlocks in 5 seconds. The gang orders hostages to put on masks and prepares for the assault. Tamayo orders the armored units to advance and knock down the door, but then the door is open from inside. Denver emerges holding a white flag in one hand and 2 red boxes in the other. Snipers have him in their crosshairs, requesting permission to fire, but Tamayo cannot give them permission. These boxes contain state secrets. It's the robbers' leverage. Those red boxes contain corruption from the Ministry of the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Intelligence, everything the system can't allow to be made public. Tamayo orders the attack to be stopped. They'll respect the white flag and withdraw. Alicia arrives in Madrid with Rio in custody. The professor calls her, but Raquel takes over the conversation. Alicia threatens to arrest Raquel's mom and Paula in the Philippines if she doesn't hand over the professor. This triggers a massive argument between the professor and Raquel. At the end of the episode, Nairobi gets into a conflict with Palermo. Apparently, Palermo is in a relationship with Helsinki. Nairobi also reveals that Palermo was in love with Berlin for 10 years, but never had the courage to tell him. Episode 6 opens with a flashback at the monastery. Berlin introduces the professor to Tatiana, his girlfriend. She's a concert pianist and a thief, and Berlin's told her everything about the Bank of Spain heist. The professor is clearly furious. He thinks Tatiana could rat them out to the government, but Berlin insists that she won't. They're in love, and right now it feels like a honeymoon. In the present, Palermo gives the professor a status update. They've melted down over 10 tons of gold. Everything is going well. Meanwhile, Alicia's come up with a plan to neutralize the robbers' leverage. She'll fabricate false government secrets and release them to the media, neutralizing the professor's blackmail advantage. Then they'll enter the bank. The professor and Raquel are listening to the radio when they hear the fake secrets getting broadcast. That's when it hits him. The military is about to storm the bank. Things get worse when they spot a car tailing them, forcing them to turn into a country road. And because their luck couldn't get any better, the RV's antenna falls off right as the vehicle gets stuck in the mud, cutting off all communication with Palermo. Luckily, some helpful villagers show up later and help pull the RV out. Inside the bank, having lost contact with the professor, Palermo wants to open fire on the incoming troops. Tokyo reminds him the professor's plan would be to buy time, not shoot at the crowds who support them. Nairobi tells her it's more important to defend themselves now than worry about Rio. The special ops team enters the bank through the bathroom, but finds all the hostages are knocked unconscious. Suddenly, the gang opens fire on them. 10 minutes later, the professor had ordered the gang to trap the special ops team with no escape. Palermo has them locked in a room with laser beams connected to explosives. The professor then sends Tamayo a video of the team stripped down, singing Bella Ciao. Anyway, the professors offer a deal. Hand over Rio in exchange for 40 hostages and the Special Ops Squad. The UN Committee Against Torture is about to interrogate Rio, which the government can't allow. Alicia accepts the deal. They'll make the exchange at 8 a.m. in daylight. The next morning, Alicia drives Rio to the bank, and Tokyo watches as he steps out of the car. Episode 7 opens with Rio walking into the Bank of Spain, reuniting with everybody. This is low-key the happiest moment of the heist. In a crazy turn, Arturo Roman rushes into the bank just as the doors close. The dude is crazy. Apparently, Arturo is desperate to see his son, but Monica makes it crystal clear that she doesn't want him. She tells Arturo the kid's name is Cincinnati, and Arturo will never see him. She calls Helsinki to take care of him. Outside the bank, Alicia holds an auction with the CNI officers for the biggest reward in history. They bid higher and higher. 10 million euros for anyone who finds the professor's whereabouts. Just then, Angel calls with good news. He's tracked down the professor and Raquel's RV. They've abandoned it in a warehouse. Speaking of, the professor calls Rio and asks how badly he was tortured. Rio wasn't allowed to leave his cell, not even to use the toilet. They left him covered in his own filth for days. Alicia kept asking where the professor was. Rio admits if he'd known, he would have talked. The professor knows Rio's been bugged, so he speaks to him using code words. In a flashback, the professor trains the gang to remove embedded microchips using dead animals for practice. And in the real world, the gang prepares to operate on Rio and remove the microchip. Meanwhile, the professor and Raquel are driving an ambulance, which gets spotted by a drone sent by Angel. The two split up and try to escape, but Angel sends troops and dogs to scour the area. The professor makes it up a tree while Raquel hides in a barn. Meanwhile, Alicia interviews the 40 released hostages and realizes the gang is melting the gold right there inside the bank. The season finale opens with the police and army on a massive manhunt for Raquel and the professor. He's hiding in a tree while she's in a barn, but they're able to communicate using a walkie-talkie. In the bank, Rio seems distant after his return, which upsets Tokyo. I mean, the guy was literally tortured, but go off, queen, get mad. She gets herself drunk and insults Rio. Tokyo also exposes her brief fling with Denver to rile him up.
Rio, did you know that I almost hooked up with Denver?
Meanwhile, the professor desperately calls Palermo and orders him to execute Plan Alcatraz. They're in an urgent situation. In a flashback, Raquel explained that they might need to distract the police into thinking the gang is escaping. This is to divert the enemy's force toward the bank rather than their manhunt. The plan uses Rio's microchip so police can hear fake escape sounds. Helsinki and Rio start digging while the others put on a show. Police position SWAT teams at the tunnels. Monica releases a ferret down a pipe, and the noise tricks the police into thinking it's the gang trying to escape. But Alicia quickly figures out that they were faking an escape to distract from the forest manhunt. She's not going to let that stop her, though. Alicia puts her other plan into action. She finds Nairobi's file and leaves a teddy bear in the bank, the same one that belonged to Nairobi's son. When the gang puts it through security, Nairobi is immediately drawn to it. Alicia contacts her through a phone inside the bear, offering a deal, but Nairobi doesn't even listen. Alicia calls Nairobi again and shows her son as an emotional pawn. As Nairobi stares in awe at her son, Alicia gives the sniper a green light to fire.
Fire.
Nairobi, get back!
Meanwhile, Suarez and his team approach the barn where Raquel is hiding. The farmers panic and give away her location. Suarez finds Raquel and demands the professor's location. The professor is listening to everything the entire time and is scrambling to save Raquel. When Raquel doesn't tell him the professor's location, Suarez pulls the trigger.
Just get out! Just get out!
In the bank, things are getting out of hand. Nairobi's condition is critical, and the gang is scrambling to help. Then, Denver spots army trucks approaching. Palermo orders DEFCON 2, and they fire missiles at the police, burning officers to keep them away. At the end of the episode, Raquel is apparently alive and in custody. Alicia had ordered Suarez to fake an execution to manipulate the professor, and it's working like a charm. Moving on to Season 4. Episode 1 opens with the gang in absolute chaos. Nairobi is bleeding out from a gunshot wound, and the crew is scrambling to save her life.
Make a puncture. Turn her around. She's choking.
Tokyo, surgical kit.
Okay, I'm going.
Yeah, that's just how bad it is. But here's the problem. Performing surgery on Nairobi in the middle of a heist with zero medical expertise is basically a death sentence. Nairobi knows this, and she's begging them just hand her over to the police so she can get actual medical care. This sparks a massive argument among the gang about what to do, and Tokyo's so fed up with the indecision that she stages a full-blown coup to take control. But Palermo steps in with the devastating news that Raquel was apparently executed by the police. He's not going to risk Nairobi getting killed too, so surgery it is. Tokyo ends up leading the operation with video guidance from a surgeon in Pakistan, because apparently Zoom surgery is the best option they've got right now. Meanwhile, the professor is an absolute mess. He genuinely believes Raquel is dead, and it's destroying him. But he's not giving up. He's got an escape plan that he'd explained to Raquel earlier. Marseille lures the police away using a tracker they think belongs to the professor, then crashes his car on a country road to make it look like an accident. He plants evidence at the scene to sell the whole thing, and it actually works. The professor manages to slip away, and eventually negotiates a 48-hour truce with Tomeo to assess Nairobi's condition. Meanwhile, as Marseille and the professor make their escape through the forest, dodging a raging bull along the way, because why not, the professor is flooded with memories of Raquel. He completely breaks down, and it's heartbreaking to watch. But just when you think that they might catch a break, Tomeo notices encrypted signals coming from the bank. He blocks the gang's call with Dr. Ahmed, and this means Nairobi's surgery is about to go very, very wrong. Episode 2 opens with Tokyo successfully completing Nairobi's surgery with help from the bank governor. They manage to remove the bullet, but it requires cutting out a portion of her lung. Not exactly ideal, but she's alive. It's about as good as it's going to get under these circumstances. With Tokyo now in charge, Palermo's ego just can't handle it. He's so furious that he's ready to walk out of the bank entirely, but the crew is just not having it, and they manage to stop him from getting out, restraining him to a chair. Tokyo calls the professor to update him. He's absolutely livid about the coup. Palermo is the only one who knows how to extract the gold from the Bank of Spain, and without him cooperating, the entire heist falls apart. But as they're talking, the professor starts piecing things together. If Raquel was actually dead, the news would have reached the gang by now, just like it did when Rio was captured and interrogated. The police staged her execution. She's alive and being held in that tent. Man, the relief on his face says everything. In a flashback, we see Marseille, Bogota, and the professor celebrating Berlin's wedding to Tatiana. It's a beautiful ceremony, but the professor pulls Berlin aside to express his concern about him getting married when he has a terminal illness. Berlin, being Berlin, doesn't seem fazed in the slightest. Back in the present, the professor and Marseille break into the apartment of Tomeo's assistant, Antonanthas. They're hoping to find leverage or information that they can use, but things go sideways very fast. Antonanthas spots them and makes a break for it by jumping out of his window straight into the pool below. Meanwhile, Raquel is transported to a police tent outside the bank, where Alicia begins interrogating her. She lays out the deal. If Raquel talks, her probable 30-year sentence could potentially be reduced to 10, and she'd be out in 5 years with good behavior. Alicia is playing the long game here, making it sound almost reasonable. The professor knows he needs to act fast. Raquel is strong, but everybody has a breaking point, and Alicia is relentless. With the gang inside the bank barely holding it together, the pressure has never been higher. Episode 3 opens with the professor and Marseille pulling Antonanthas out of the pool after his dramatic escape attempt. They make him an offer he can't refuse. 1 million euros to do a few tasks for them. To protect him in case the police find out he's working for the professor, they rig his apartment with fake bombs as an alibi. Antonanthas confirms what the professor suspected. Raquel is being held in the tent. The professor hands him his watch, tells him to wear it when he's near her. It's a signal, so Raquel will know that the professor knows that she's alive and exactly where she is. It's simple, but clever. Meanwhile, Raquel's ex-husband Alberto is examining the ambulance that she and the professor used for mobile transportation and broadcasting. He finds a phone SIM card that Raquel tried to destroy, but even though it's burnt, they are able to analyze it. The police discover one call made to the Philippines, where Raquel's mother and daughter are staying. Well, that's not good. Alicia uses this as leverage, telling Raquel that they know exactly where her family is. She even allows Raquel to call them. But just as Raquel's about to make the call, Antonanthas sets a coffee down on the table. She notices that he's wearing the professor's watch, and she stops immediately. She immediately figures out the professor is telling her not to take the deal. In a flashback, we see the professor raising concerns to Berlin about Palermo's ability to work as part of a team. He worries that Palermo loves the plan and being in command more than he cares about the people executing it. Berlin, of course, defends his choice, but the professor's doubts are valid. Back in the present, those doubts become reality. Palermo's done playing nice. He wants his command back, and he's willing to create absolute chaos to get it. He colludes with Gandia, the restrained security chief. Palermo verbally coaches Gandia on how to dislocate his thumbs so he can slip through his handcuffs.
Strength and determination. Grab your thumb and twist it.
Ugh, that's gotta hurt like hell. But it does work. Gandia manages to free himself, and Rio, who's guarding the hostages, is apparently too emotionally shaken to stop him from escaping. This is about to get really, really bad. Just as things are spiraling out of control, Nairobi regains consciousness. At least there's one piece of good news. Episode 4 opens with the gang frantically searching for Gandia. They know that he's loose, and they know he's dangerous. Turns out, he's already found Nairobi and is attempting to suffocate her with a pillow. Seriously? She just survived surgery. But Nairobi's not going down that easily. She manages to stab him in the neck with a needle, and Gandia flees just as the gang rushes in to save her. Man, that was way too close. Meanwhile, Arturo is back again trying to rally the hostages, calling themselves the Resistance, like he's leading some kind of revolution. Monica and Denver shut it down immediately. The last thing anybody needs is Arturo playing hero. Outside the bank, Alicia opens up to Raquel about something personal. When Raquel asks about Alicia's husband, Alicia reveals that he died 2 months ago from pancreatic cancer. It's a rare vulnerable moment from her. Tomeo questions whether Alicia is fit for the job given what she's going through, but she fires back, telling the team that no one is more qualified to lead this operation than she is. She's constantly calculating moves against the professor, and she's not backing down. Back inside the bank, Gandia strikes again. He drops a noose from the ceiling around Helsinki's neck and nearly hangs him. Jesus. Tokyo and Bogota manage to save Helsinki just in time, but before they can catch Gandia, he retreats into his secret panic room. On his way there, he cuts the telecommunication cords, which renders all of the professor's cameras in the bank completely inoperable. Now they're flying blind. The panic room is fully equipped with weapons and a communication center, and Gandia wastes no time using it to contact Tomeo. Tomeo reminds him that they're under a truce with the professor, but Gandia doesn't care. He wants to coordinate an attack. Antonianthas tips off the professor that Gandia is communicating with the police from inside the panic room. The professor immediately relays this information to Tokyo, trying to warn her, but before she can react, Gandia sneaks up from behind and knocks her out. Episode 5 opens with a flashback where Denver and Moscow ask the professor if Juan, Moscow's godchild, can join them in the heist. The professor didn't think that it's a good idea. In the present, Gandia has Tokyo restrained in the panic room. He gets on the bank's intercom and announces to everybody that he has her, and that Palermo is the one who helped him escape. In another flashback, Berlin tells the professor that with dozens of hostages, there's a real risk they could stage a rebellion at some point. His solution? Have an infiltrated member pose as a hostage to defuse the situation if one arises. It's a pretty smart play. The professor, Moscow, and Denver meet up with Juan, who's now a trans woman named Julia. In the present, she's posing as a hostage inside the bank under the name Manila, and nobody has a clue. Meanwhile, Palermo admits to the professor that what Gandia said is true. He did help him escape. The professor tells him that he'll be punished later, but right now they need him. He orders the group to unchain Palermo so he can help deal with this mess. Tough call. They don't have much of a choice. Meanwhile, the robbers continue melting down the gold in the foundry, 43.5 tons at this point. While in the freight elevator, Bogota and Nairobi share a passionate kiss, and she tells him they should get married when they get out of the bank. It's a sweet moment in the middle of all this chaos. But things take a deadly turn when Rio and Denver enter an elevator. Gandia throws a grenade into it just as the doors close. They manage to muffle the grenade with their bulletproof vests and helmets, and somehow they survive the explosion. The gang rushes to their position, and a massive shootout breaks out between Gandia and nearly all members of the gang. It's absolute mayhem. During the chaos, Gandia escapes through a duct vent. This guy is freaking John McClane. The vent leads him directly to the room Nairobi is in, and he grabs her in a headlock, just when you think things couldn't get any worse. Episode 6 opens with the gang hearing Nairobi's gunfire. They rush to her location, but Gandhi has already made his move. He shoots a hole through the door and forces her head through it while he ties her hands to the door, using her as a human shield. This guy's an absolute psycho. In flashback, we see Nairobi asking the professor to be the father of her child through in vitro fertilization. She sees him in class and thinking about how brilliant he is. Nairobi believes the professor has them good genes, you know? The professor is initially reluctant, and he's not the type to let go of attachments. He'd never stopped thinking about having a child out there somewhere in the world, but Nairobi reminds him that he taught them all to help each other, and the professor agrees to do it. Back in the present, the professor is falling apart. He used to just have a cool gang with cool city names, but now he could potentially have a child with 2 members of the gang. Mixing professional and personal does not work, and it's catching up to him. But he forces himself to focus. The professor deduces that the panic room must be near the governor's office, behind the governor's bathroom, even though it's not on the blueprints. He relays this information to Palermo. Outside the bank, Tomeo and Alicia are arguing. Alicia realizes that Gandhi is on the loose, armed and acting on his own. Tomeo admits he officially ordered Gandia not to do it, but Gandia didn't listen. Alicia calls Tomeo trash and says he's holding an absurd truce publicly while secretly sending a lunatic to do the dirty work. Meanwhile, the professor tracks the aircraft that brought Rio to Spain, and he sends Marseille to Algeria to gather intel. In a flashback, Nairobi wakes Tokyo up to tell her the professor said yes about the baby. Nairobi's ecstatic. She tells Tokyo they're going to name the baby Ibiza, and Tokyo will be the godmother. Back in the present, Gandia forces the gang to lower their weapons. He's aiming at Nairobi's head, and he's wearing a bulletproof vest. They won't be able to get to him, not without hurting Nairobi. He tells them he's about to let her go, moving slowly toward his escape, and then, just as he releases her, Gandia shoots Nairobi straight in the head.
I told you I was gonna kill you.
This dude is crazy. The shock is immediate and devastating. Denver chases after Gandia in a rage and hurls a grenade at him, injuring him as he escapes. But it doesn't matter. The rest of the gang gathers around Nairobi as she lays dead on the floor. Episode 7 opens with a flash forward. Gandia is communicating with Tomeo, telling him he's eliminated Nairobi and he's heading to the roof where he needs a helicopter. Back in the present, a wounded Gandia makes it back to the panic room. The gang uncovers the tunnel to the panic room beyond the governor's bathroom, exactly where the professor said it would be. Palermo breaks the news to the professor that Nairobi's been killed. The professor's silent, processing the loss of yet another person that he cared about.
Meanwhile, Monica tells the foundry workers that from now on, she's in charge.
They've melted 44 tons of gold and they need to raise the temperature to increase production. They need to get this gold out of here, and then they need to leave too. Outside the bank, Antonyanthas calls the professor with urgent news. The police are planning to storm the bank, and they're trying to contact Gandia to coordinate. The professor tells Palermo to cut the telecommunications to the panic room and knock Gandia out with sleeping gas. He needs Gandia alive, it's key to the plan. But he's not done yet, as the professor plays his first card. The gang opens the doors of the bank. What emerges stops everybody in their tracks. The governor's bodyguards carry out Nairobi's body in a coffin. It's a salute of honor, a funeral procession right in front of the police. The tent comes to a complete standstill. The professor strikes again as he plasters Madrid with posters of Rio's face with the words, "Buried alive." He sends Rio's testimony to the entire national and international press. Rio recounts how he was illegally detained, tortured, forced to dig his own grave, and buried alive in a box until he lost consciousness.
They put me in a coffin, and they buried me alive.
It's a horror story, and it's broadcast everywhere. At a press conference, Colonel Prieto denies Rio's accusations, but Marseille has been working in Algeria. He forces one of the men who actually tortured Rio to corroborate the story on video, and it's broadcast nationally during the press conference.
We were paid 200,000 euros to do it by Colonel.
The timing's perfect, and it completely destroys the colonel's denial. The public pressure is just too much, and Tomeo calls off the assault on the bank, but somebody needs to take the blame. Tomeo tells Alicia that she has to take the blame for everything. She'll be fired, suspended without pay, but he promises she'll be paid from reserve funds, and there won't be any prison time. Alicia knows she's being thrown under the bus, but she doesn't have much choice. Meanwhile, the professor enlists Benjamin, Manila's father, and his crew for a plan to free Raquel. He tells them they're going to rescue somebody who's being guarded by 26 police officers. It's almost impossible, but there's a possibility if they know where they're taking her and when. And the professor will make them transfer her. Inside the panic room, Gandia unties Tokyo so she can remove the shrapnel from his back. Bad move. The moment she gets the chance, she knocks him unconscious. The group rushes in and frees her. Tokyo asks how Nairobi is, and the silence tells her everything. Meanwhile, the professor is still on his assault. He naturally broadcasts a video exposing the illegal detainment of Raquel inside the tent. Internal Affairs shows up with a judge's order, and the Ministry of the Interior takes over her custody, removing her from the tent. The professor is systematically dismantling their control piece by piece. Episode 8, the season finale, opens with a flashback. Berlin confronts Palermo about his obvious feelings for him, and then reveals his own feelings for Palermo. They kiss, but Berlin tells him they must part ways and give up the plan because their love would interfere too much. In the present, Alicia holds a press conference where she admits everything. She confesses that she used Nairobi's son to lure her to the window to be shot, that Nairobi was later killed by Gandia with Colonel Tomeo's support, and that Rio was buried alive. Meanwhile, Benjamin and Marseille head to a Chinese restaurant to begin constructing a tunnel that leads to the parking garage of the Supreme Court, where Raquel is being brought to testify. It's an ambitious plan, but they don't have much time. Alicia has been fired, and lawsuits have been initiated against her, but she's not done yet. She begins pursuing the professor on her own. She deduces that Antonyanthas must be the mole, and tracks down his wife. After extracting information from her, she finds footage of Antonyanthas being helped out by the pool by the professor, along with the license plate of his car. Meanwhile, the professor transmits a fake signal of the parking garage so that Benjamin and his crew can drill the hole without being noticed by the guards. After testifying in court, Raquel is taken through the garage where Benjamin and his crew are already waiting. They disguise themselves as a judge, a lawyer, and a prisoner. When Raquel is escorted through the parking garage, they take control of the guards, strap them with bombs, and bring in a woman disguised as Raquel. They force the guards to take their normal route outside of the parking garage with the fake Raquel, while the real Raquel crawls through the tunnel to the Chinese restaurant. Meanwhile, back at the bank, a restrained Gandia regains consciousness. The gang forces Gandia to radio Tomeo that he's heading to the roof and requests to be airlifted out. The professor intercepts Tomeo's request for a helicopter and brings his own, piloted by Marseille, with Raquel in it disguised as the police that's going to rescue Gandia. But then, the helicopter drops Raquel and leaves without taking Gandia. The entire time, Tomeo and his team are confused as hell. Raquel explains to Tomeo over the comms that the helicopter had issues, that they have to head into the building without it. The gang creates chaos on the roof to make it look like they're fighting the police, but in reality, it's just Raquel entering the building. They really pulled it off. Back in the tent, Tomeo receives a call telling them somebody else is there in place of Raquel. It's at this moment that they knew that they just got tricked. While the gang is celebrating, Alicia walks into the professor and holds him at gunpoint. Alicia has just found his hideout. Episode 1 of Season 5 opens with Alicia walking through an abandoned stormwater tank, a hideout where the professor's been coordinating the entire heist. She spots the professor, and before he can react, she points a gun at him. She mocks him, telling the genius that he's living like a rat in the most disgusting hole in Madrid. She wants to know his entire plan, and then she's going to get him convicted for terrorism. The professor tries to get out of the situation, and they fight, but Alicia isn't giving up that easily. In a flashback, we see Berlin meet his son Raphael. Yep, apparently Berlin had a wife and a son before Tatiana. It's clear they haven't seen each other in a very long time, so they're reconciling. The conversation then turns to Berlin trying to convince Raphael to do a heist with him since he's a cybersecurity engineer from MIT. In another flashback, the professor tells Raquel about the Rome plan. He's certain that the police will turn to the army once they manage to return one of their own to the bank. He knows their sole aim will be to destroy them, so they'll need to get out as soon as possible. In the present, Raquel arrives at the bank and orders Palermo to start extracting the gold that's been melted. In the tent, Tomeo believes that this is a matter of national security and wants to involve the army. He orders Sagasta, the commander of the special forces of the Spanish army, to get ready for an intervention. Meanwhile, Marseille, who used the military helicopter to drop Raquel on the bank roof, is being tracked down by Tomeo's team. He lands the helicopter at a farm, and when the authorities arrive, they meet Benjamin. Benjamin acts like an innocent farmer nearby. He implements distraction tactics and purposely describes the wrong car. The police chase the wrong person. A different man gets out with a bomb strapped to him, but a flashback reveals it's the husband of the fake Raquel. Well, that's elaborate. The police have been tricked once again. In reality, Benjamin just enters a farm truck with Marseille inside and they get away. As the episode wears on, something is clearly not right. Raquel is trying to radio the professor, but he's tied up by Alicia. She's interrogating him for information and shoots him in the foot.
Okay, no threats then.
The professor reveals they're getting the gold out by making it into nuggets and putting them through the sewer system. Alicia doesn't believe him though. Soon, Alicia forces the professor to answer the radio. Alicia reveals herself speaking into the radio. The others now know the professor's captured. In the present, the professor delivers an emotional moment, apologizing to each member of his team one at a time. The episode ends with the gang looking outside and seeing the military approach the bank. This war just escalated. Episode 2 opens with Tokyo, Monica, and Raquel removing their boots and walking out of the bank barefoot. Raquel calls out to Colonel Tomeo as Monica raises the white flag. Tomeo's furious. Everyone now knows Raquel escaped from police custody. He wants to eliminate her, but Angel stops him. They're surrendering with a white flag, a symbol of peace. He tells Tomeo their battle is not to just beat these robbers, but to show the world who the good guys really are. Tomeo reluctantly agrees to negotiate. The governor explains to Arturo that this is no longer a civil matter. They're not hostages anymore, they're collateral damage. The army will shoot anybody wearing a Dali mask. Raquel shows Tomeo video footage of Gandia, showing that there's shrapnel lodged between his cervical vertebrae and he urgently needs a neurosurgeon. Tomeo gives her an ultimatum. Release Gandia within an hour or he storms the bank. Raquel realizes something crucial. If Tomeo had the professor in custody, he would have used that as his trump card. Alicia is working alone. That means they still have a chance. Meanwhile, Bogota wants revenge for Nairobi's death. He and Tokyo beat Gandia to a pulp, but during the chaos, Arturo and the governor seize weapons from the armory. Arturo opens fire in the lobby, hitting several hostages. I'm convinced Arturo is just in the show to do stupid things for absolutely no reason at all. Meanwhile, at the professor's hideout, Alicia spots Marseille and Benjamin arriving through surveillance cameras. She knocks the professor unconscious with a fire extinguisher and injects him with drugs. When Marseille and Benjamin enter, Alicia ambushes them, injecting Marseille and holding Benjamin at gunpoint. So now, they're all at Alicia's mercy. Back at the bank, Helsinki reports the army is moving toward the entrance. Raquel orders them to release Gandia immediately. They strap a smoke grenade filled with fentanyl to his chest. Gandia runs out holding his breath, but he can't hold it long enough. He inhales the smoke and collapses before he can tell anybody anything. The intervention is called off. Inside the bank, Arturo continues his rampage with a flamethrower, taunting Denver over the radio and claiming he's Cincinnati's real father. He nearly barbecues Denver, but Monica has had enough. She climbs through the vents with a pistol and emerges behind Arturo. Monica doesn't hesitate to shoot Arturo in the chest. He's been a thorn in their side this whole time, so I guess he had it coming. Episode 3 opens with Monica trying to revive Arturo. Using a defibrillator, they do bring him back, but there's the small matter of the bullet in his heart. Palermo just wants to finish him off, but Raquel insists that they save him. The governor and 2 hostages push Arturo out on a food cart, and paramedics rush him to an ambulance. Monica watches from the window, devastated. She feels like a murderer. Cincinnati will grow up alone if Arturo dies, and she'll never see her son again. The governor is brought into the tent for questioning and tells Tomeo everything that happened. Tomeo also sees this as a great opportunity to fabricate false information about the gang in public. In a flashback, we see Berlin planning a heist with his son Rafael, accompanied by Tatiana, Marseille, and Bogota. Rafael still needs convincing, but he has no choice in the end. Back in the present, Alicia tries to reason with the professor as they watch live news coverage. Arturo's shooting is all over the news, and the team is being called murderers and executioners. Alicia tells the professor that if he cooperates with her, she can save the team. But then the live coverage shifts to Tomeo's press conference, where he brands Alicia as a traitor and claims she's working with the professor. Alicia realizes that she's finished. She can't use the professor to save herself. The professor sees his opening and tries to convince her to join them since she has nowhere to go. But then Alicia's water breaks.
Your mouth, I just need to think.
Yep, she's literally about to have her baby. This episode couldn't get any crazier. Inside the bank, Palermo addresses the team to lift their spirits before war. He says they only need to stall long enough to melt all the gold. He asks for 3 volunteers to attack the army from both ends. Basically, a death sentence. Denver, Tokyo, and Manila volunteer. Tomeo returns to the bank and kicks all the police officers out, making this officially a military operation. Gandia tells them how to enter the bank without being detected, and he plans to join the assault to get revenge. Angel tries to stop Tomeo, but nothing he says matters anymore. Back at the hideout, the professor keeps trying to convince Alicia to let him go, but she's stubborn and tries to deliver their baby on her own. Alicia struggles to push her baby out. The professor realizes she's a breech baby and insists that she release them to help. Alicia has no choice and cuts Benjamin loose to free the professor and Marseille, who then help deliver Alicia's baby. At the bank, Major Sagasta and his team make their way back to the bank, and everybody takes their positions. Palermo realizes they're going to climb and blow the roof. He orders Tokyo, Denver, and Manila to head to the stairs immediately. Just as Tokyo, Denver, and Manila reach the rooftop, Sagasta blows it open. The professor pulls out Alicia's baby just as the explosion rocks the bank. Wow, this is all a lot to handle. Episode 4 opens with the army blowing the roof, while Helsinki is at a dining hall below it. The blast doesn't kill him, but a massive statue falls on his legs, crushing them. Palermo radios to see if he's alive. For a moment, there's total silence. Then Helsinki responds. He's alive, but he's trapped. Meanwhile, after the professor saves Alicia and her baby, he immediately turns his attention to the heist and gets a status report. Tokyo, Denver, and Manila are on the rooftop, ready to attack Sagasta from behind, but the professor stops them. There are snipers all over the bank. If they go through that door, they'll be killed. Rio, Palermo, and Bogota arrive at the dining hall just before Helsinki is fired at. Palermo fires a rocket launcher to stop Sagasta and his team. In flashback, Berlin, Tatiana, Marseille, and Bogota prepare for a heist. Rafael's job is to duplicate keycards to access the gold room using a piano tuner. Their only problem is a guard named Hans who never leaves his post. They plan to use Hans's father, who lost his mind, as a distraction. It's a pretty low blow. Marseille brings Hans's father with him, and the distraction works. Berlin sneaks inside the gold room, Rafael hacks the safe, and they switch out the gold with replicas. After the heist, Rafael feels amazing as he caresses the briefcase full of gold, but Berlin takes it from him and throws it out the window. Rafael is shocked, but Berlin tells him only a true thief feels like he owns someone else's property. Later on a boat, Tatiana pulls the briefcase out of the water, after Bogota retrieves it in scuba gear. Back in reality, Manila, Denver, and Tokyo take the hostages to the roof. They tell half of them to remove their masks. Meanwhile, Raquel reveals that they placed microphones inside the governor's handcuffs, so they have everything Tomeo said about fabricating evidence. The professor contacts Tomeo and plays the recording, ordering him not to proceed with the second attack. Tomeo has no choice but to hold off. Inside the bank, Palermo reaches Helsinki. There's a moment of ceasefire as Sagasta attends to his wounded teammates. Palermo, Bogota, and Rio pull Helsinki out from under the statue. Meanwhile, on the roof, the hostages are scattered everywhere with Tokyo, Denver, and Manila hidden among them. The 3 drop through the hole in the roof, landing behind Sagasta's position. Now, the gang has Sagasta's team surrounded from both sides. It's a standoff. Tokyo and Gandia lock eyes from across the room, and they both know they just have to kill each other. Palermo calls out to Sagasta and orders them to surrender, just as Tomeo tells Sagasta over the radio that a second team won't be coming. Sagasta realizes he's been abandoned and signals surrender, but it's a trick. After the countdown, they throw smoke grenades, blinding everybody. In the chaos, they separate Tokyo, Denver, and Manila from the rest of the team. Sagasta and his men push everybody else back into the museum and slam the safety lock shut. Now it's just 3 against 8 in the smoke-filled dining hall. Episode 5 opens with a flashback about Tokyo and her first love from Season 1, Renee. It's raining hard as Tokyo runs out of a building with Renee. A security guard opens fire at Renee but misses. Another guard chases them and hides, waiting for his shot. The guard quickly comes out of hiding to kill Renee. Tokyo sees everything, and fires and kills the guard just as police vehicles arrive. Tokyo flees the scene, leaving Renee's lifeless body on the street. The professor and Berlin watch the news report about the robbery and Tokyo's escape. Still in the past, Berlin wants Tokyo for their heist, but the professor is hesitant, since she's the most wanted person in Madrid. Berlin argues that's exactly why they need her. She has nothing to lose. The professor agrees. If the police don't capture her within 72 hours, they'll find her. Tokyo hides in an underground parking garage. The police follow her wet footprints, but she hides by hanging from the ceiling. She jumps the officers, takes them hostage, and escapes in their patrol car. Tokyo hid for 10 days, replaying all her moments with Renee. The grief overwhelmed her as she blamed herself for convincing him to rob the bank, which got him killed. In the present, Tokyo, Denver, and Manila are trapped as Sagasta and his men fire at them. Gandia argues with Sagasta about how to breach. Gandia wants to throw grenades and storm in, but Sagasta wants to drill through the pantry. Tokyo and Denver hear drilling from the pantry, and Tokyo shoots through the wall, revealing their location. Sagasta orders the sniper team to fire. Denver takes cover, but Tokyo gets hit by the bullets. Denver drags her to safety and applies tourniquets to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, Monica discovers a dumbwaiter connected to the kitchen. She radios Denver, who opens it. Unfortunately, it's 6 floors down, and with Tokyo's injuries, she can't climb, so she tells Manila and Denver to leave. Downstairs, Rio drills a hole in the floor, but it's only big enough for his hand. Rio wants to widen the gap, but there's just no time. Sagasta and his men blow through the pantry wall and enter. Denver and Manila make it down, but Tokyo knows she can't make the jump. She holds Rio's hand one last time as Sagasta's team riddles her with bullets. Tokyo's still alive when Gandia stands over her and points her pistol at her face. Tokyo opens her hand to reveal grenade pins. Gandia shouts for everybody to get back, but it's too late. And just like that, Tokyo is gone. But she didn't go quietly. She took Gandia and several of Sagasta's men down with her, making damn sure her last stand counted. That's the most Tokyo thing ever. Episode 6 opens with everybody mourning Tokyo's death. The professor punches the mirror in the bathroom, screaming as he vents his anger on the innocent shards of glass. Benjamin rushes to the door, begging him to open it. Alicia takes this as an opportunity to escape. She takes the professor's gun and then steals their car, driving out of the place with their baby. The professor and Marseille chase after her. The chase continues on the freeway. She shoots Marseille's tires as she passes him, leaving the professor to continue chasing. In the bank, Palermo sits down with Sagasta to negotiate. Sagasta wants them to release his wounded man, but Palermo refuses. A surgeon will come in instead. Meanwhile, Rio and Raquel go to the kitchen to find Tokyo's remains, where Rio gets a moment with Tokyo's soul before it leaves for heaven. Or maybe that other place. Back to the professor, he's followed Alicia to an abandoned farm. He enters the barn and finds her pointing a gun at him. The professor aims and shoots, but the gun is empty. Alicia had emptied the clip earlier, and now she has him trapped. Alicia ties the professor up and shoves him into the trunk of an old car. Back in the bank, Denver and Manila escort the surgeons inside to treat Sagasta's wounded man in Helsinki. Meanwhile, Rio and Raquel hijack the airwaves to broadcast live from the bank. Raquel tells everybody 6 people died, 5 soldiers in Tokyo. They tell everybody to forget about them because they aren't likely to get out alive. But the people outside aren't leaving. Tomeo's furious Raquel has won back their supporters. Speaking of which, Tomeo receives a call from his wife and rushes home. He finds her tied to a chair with Alicia pointing a pistol at her head. Alicia wants Tomeo to confess the lies he told about her, but he refuses. Tomeo has pressed a panic button, and Alicia sees the alarm, so she knows the police are coming. She knocks Tomeo unconscious and leaves. Back in the trunk, the professor chews through the seat and crawls into the car. He realizes Alicia went to Tomeo to clear her name. He gets out of the car and goes into the building just as the police arrive and enter after him. Alicia finds the professor on the stairs knocking on a lady's door. She then points her gun at the lady, forcing her to let them both enter into her apartment. The professor closes the door behind them just in time to get away from the police coming upstairs. Episode 7 opens with the police storming the building and heading straight to Tomeo's apartment. He regains consciousness and orders them to search every apartment and set up a perimeter. Meanwhile, the professor uses a clothesline to rappel down the window carrying Alicia's baby. Alicia follows him. They make their way through the next door restaurant. The professor and Alicia almost escape, but backup police make it impossible. The professor and Alicia make their way inside an apartment building. They look out the window and see the army marching down the street. They know quite well the army will search every apartment to find them. In flashback, the professor tries to convince Berlin not to go through with the Bank of Spain heist. Berlin and Palermo had everything figured out. They turned gold bars into tiny grains and shoot them through the bank's pipelines to the storm drain. The professor pointed out the pipes were too old to withstand the water pressure, but Berlin was full of optimism. Back in the present, Palermo, Rio, and Denver go to the vaults to begin extraction. Bogota prepares the hoses. Benjamin and his men stand by in the storm drain on the other side to receive it. Palermo and the crew shovel gold into the pump and activate it.
Bogota, pressure!
They wait, but nothing comes out on Benjamin's end. After several agonizing minutes, the gold finally makes it to the storm drain. Meanwhile, the professor and Alicia hide inside a couch in the apartment, and when the soldiers search the place, they don't find anything. When they're gone, Alicia breaks down in an emotional moment with the professor. The professor vows to help her so her child won't grow up in prison, and Alicia tells him she won't turn him in. The professor charges a phone he found and calls Benjamin. The professor gives Benjamin a new mission to hijack a garbage truck to rescue him and Alicia. They empty garbage bins, and the professor and Alicia hide inside. The guards don't pay attention, and the truck picks up the bins.
3. Ready or not, here I go.
Benjamin and Marseille help them out, and they successfully escape. They return to the storm drain to see the gold extraction foundry in full swing, with multiple men making gold ingots.
There's a foundry in the stormwater tank.
Episode 8 opens with yet another flashback. Berlin and Tatiana are about to have dinner when she stopped him from ordering. She's no longer happy with their relationship and wants a divorce. Berlin suspects there's another man, so when Tatiana leaves, Berlin follows her to a hotel, and wouldn't you guess who it is? It's Berlin's son, Raphael. What the hell? In the present, the team finishes extracting the gold pellets from the bank. Outside the bank, an engineer confirms the team may have emptied the water from the vault. Tomeo asks how they got the gold out. The engineer explains it's impossible unless they reduce the gold into particles. Tomeo orders them to figure out where the gold is going so they can intercept it. Angel radios Suarez. 5 locations need checking for gold. Suarez and his men check the water treatment plant, but they find nothing. Suarez searches the dam, but find nothing. They're down to the last stop, the storm drain. In flashback, Berlin confronted Raphael at the hotel bar and asked how long he'd been with Tatiana, who, just to remind you, is not his mom. Raphael said 3 weeks, and he apologized, but Berlin isn't having it. Tatiana came down with a suitcase. Berlin gave them his blessings, and surprisingly, let them leave peacefully.
You may go in peace.
As soon as their cab left, Berlin unleashed his fury on the bar, destroying everything. Back in the present, Suarez and his men get close to the storm drain. Marseille sees them approaching and calls everybody to gather weapons. The professor can't believe they found them. It's even harder to believe the professor didn't expect this. He stops everybody, tells them it's over. They surrender as police enter and arrest them. The professor's in the police truck with Benjamin, Alicia, and Marseille, but something feels off. They should be leaving by now. Why aren't they living? That's when he remembers Palermo's explanation. The cops expect the gold downstream in the southern storm drain, but they're hidden up north instead. It's a perfect misdirection. At least, that's what it should be. The professor realizes something's very wrong and kicks the door down, only to find the gold is gone. Completely gone. They hadn't been captured by the real police at all, but rather Raphael and Tatiana dressed head to toe as cops. They out-professored the professor. Episode 9 opens with the professor and his team going after the gold. The professor and Marseille track the trucks to an old quarry, just kilometers from the storm drain. They cautiously approach, but the trucks are empty, and the gold is gone. Palermo and the professor already know who stole it. No one alive knows about the plan except for Tatiana. The professor enters a shack and finds security cameras pointed at the storm drain entrance. Tatiana was watching all along, waiting to strike. The professor notices tire marks and a bulldozer's tracks. He imagines how Tatiana and her crew loaded the gold into dump trucks and disguised them as humble dirt carriers. He orders Marseille to return to the storm drain and execute Plan Tom Thumb. He orders Rio to hack security cameras in the area to locate Tatiana. The professor assures everybody inside the bank he'll recover the gold.
We're going to recover the gold. And we're going to get you out of there.
And get them out alive. Meanwhile, one of Sagasta's soldiers, Arteche, moves through the vents, disabling all the explosives around the bank as Sagasta had ordered. The surgeons who entered in episode 6 were also soldiers, Sagasta and Tomeo's backup plan. Meanwhile, Marseille and his men burn all evidence of the heist: blueprints, photos, maps, sticky notes. Raquel blames the professor for losing the gold because he didn't let them defend themselves. The professor explains Tatiana's team looked like an advanced tactical unit. He didn't want to risk their lives. He asks if they see any anomalies in the CCTV footage. Raquel points out the road is wet, meaning it isn't live. The professor realizes they altered the footage because they're going somewhere they can only reach on that specific road. Since it's a major highway, they'd never use it to flee Madrid. Raphael and Tatiana aren't fleeing, they're hiding. There's still a chance that they could find them. Speaking of, Raphael and Tatiana are burying the gold, making it look like somebody lived there for years. They turn the vacant lot into a complete house with a garden within minutes. No one would suspect the gold is buried under it. Meanwhile, Tomeo prepares to storm the bank on Arteche's signal. Inside the bank, Sagasta's injured soldier pretends to have a heart attack, pressuring Palermo to release the doctors. Just as he releases them, Arteche lands from the vent and disarms him. Which is insane, considering Helsinki is right behind her with a rifle. But Helsinki can't risk getting Palermo killed, so he surrenders. The army storms the bank, and one by one the gang falls, including Raquel and Rio. Sagasta radios Tamayo that they've secured the bank with no casualties. Tamayo enters the bank and takes Raquel's radio. He calls the professor and tells him to turn on his TV to see his comrades walk out. The professor then asks to surrender with his team. Tamayo gives him 15 minutes to show up at the bank. Before he leaves, the professor tells Alicia to find the gold while he goes to the bank. If anyone can find Tatiana and Raphael, it's her. Meanwhile, Tamayo opens the vault to check the gold, but it's gone. He realizes no one could find out that the National Reserve gold is missing because it'll end Spain's economy. Tamayo orders his men to fake the operation until they get control. Is there any way out of this nightmare scenario? In the final episode of the series, the professor enters the Bank of Spain to face his team and Tamayo. Tamayo asks where the gold is, but the professor says he doesn't know, and he's actually telling the truth. Tamayo drags him to look at his team one by one, trying to play with his conscience. Rio would spend the rest of his life in prison. Denver and Monica would never see Cincinnati grow up. Raquel would never see her mother or daughter again. Tamayo's ploy doesn't work. The professor needs to buy Alicia enough time to find the gold. Tamayo offers freedom in exchange for information, but no one from the team speaks. Meanwhile, Alicia thinks about where to start looking. Before entering the bank, the professor told his team to release a video showing how they got the gold out of the bank.
We're going to explain to you how to get the gold out of a state's national reserve.
Tamayo and everyone in the command center watch in awe as it streams worldwide. Tamayo angrily walks back into the bank, but there's nothing he can do to stop it. The thing is, the professor still has leverage. If the government announces Spain lost its gold, everybody would sell their stocks, and Spain would become bankrupt. They could reverse it by giving the gold back, so now their very lives depend on getting back the gold that they lost. Meanwhile, Angel finds the professor's base in the northern storm drain and calls Tamayo. Marseille used trucks to lead the police on a wild goose chase. They weren't carrying any gold. Tamayo goes to the professor and starts beating him, threatening to kill him in front of Raquel until he tells where the gold is. The professor then offers Tamayo a solution. The only way to win is if they both win. The professor admits the gold is out of the bank, but no one from the team knows where it is. He couldn't risk anybody knowing because Tamayo could torture them. Tamayo's left with no choice but to negotiate. The professor tells Tamayo to hold a press conference telling the world that they've found the gold. Speaking of which, Alicia finally does find the gold. She enters the property and sees the grass isn't real. Alicia trips an alarm, and in minutes Tatiana and her team arrive armed to the teeth. They're in a standoff to see who keeps the gold. Alicia then hands Raphael a note written by the professor. Tamayo holds a press conference as agreed. He'll receive the gold once he announces they found it. The professor doesn't disappoint, and trucks arrive just as Tamayo gives the announcement. Just like Raquel, we're all surprised that the trucks are there. The professor simply says it's all part of the plan. In one last flashback, Palermo confronts the professor before the heist, wanting to know the final part. Palermo knew the professor wouldn't go through all this trouble just to steal the gold and give it back. The professor explains no country actually pays for anything in gold anymore, that everything is just an illusion. Palermo realizes what the professor was actually planning. While Tatiana and Raphael steal the real gold, the professor would give Tamayo brass bars painted to look like gold. Spain's reserve would be fake, but as long as everybody believes that it's real, nothing actually changes. Back in the present, after inspecting the bars more closely, Tamayo realizes the gold bars are actually brass. Tamayo furiously rushes to the professor. He orders Suarez to load weapons and point them at the team, but the professor just tells Tamayo that the whole world believes they found the gold, and that's all that matters. The professor tells Tamayo it'll just be another state secret, and that nothing will change. Tamayo will become a national hero. Still, Tamayo orders Suarez to shoot down the entire team. Gunshots ring from inside the bank. Tamayo addresses the press, saying the special forces killed everybody and bodies get rolled out in hospital vans. But in reality, everything is part of the plan, and everybody's still alive. Everyone opens their body bags as hospital vans carry them away. Part of the professor's agreement with Tamayo is that he'll stop chasing them. They completed the heist. Tamayo's no choice but to lock the brass bars inside the Bank of Spain. Meanwhile, Raphael and Tatiana surrender the gold to Alicia. The note the professor left Raphael assures him he'll receive his share. 24 hours later, the team meets at an undisclosed airfield. A military general hands them new identities and a helicopter. Rio, Denver, Monica, Raquel, the professor, Palermo, Helsinki, Manila, Bogota, and Alicia are all there. They're alive and free. Alicia tells him the gold is already heading to Portugal. The team boards the helicopter, and as it lifts off, the professor finally sighs in relief. Palermo looks at him. They both know they accomplished Berlin's dream of robbing the Bank of Spain. And that is the complete story of Money Heist, from the Royal Mint to the Bank of Spain. Covering this one has been really incredible, honestly, and I hope you enjoyed the ride. Feel free to click on the video on screen to watch another recap. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.